Alright, should be live video. Draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com also. Video presentation. Once again, trying to, have a conversation, a discussion, an argument, a disagreement with people regarding what seems or is a logical thing to say about how reality functions. And, there should be, with all of our technology and everything else, we should be able to resolve these kinds of disputes about reality. I can always make comparisons to the kind of evolution argument, and how over time it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's strange. It doesn't write on this. Oh, it's the wrong pen. That's why it doesn't write on it. Good reason. Okay. So I don't need that yet. Anyway, all right. So I figure I'll read a couple of comments and then get to my usual agenda of playing something and responding to it. But it is unfortunate that the people in the comment section can't make videos. They can't draw something and then videotape it and explain it. And it doesn't seem like it's that demanding a function to ask from people who are usually tech savvy, let's call it. If you're going to have any knowledge about physics and the evidence of physics and all the experiments that are being done, what Stern-Gerlach is an experiment, that kind of stuff. You really should be able to make a video on YouTube. It really shouldn't be beyond your capacity. So anyway, I find these characters somewhat suspicious, as people. But anyway, they never have screen names that make any sense, all that kind of thing. So anyway, so some piggy, that's what it says, piggy bean or something. When you lift something up more slowly, your body uses more energy. So, yes, clearly you're fighting gravity for a longer period of time. Now, your actual lifting part would be a tiny part of the work, right? So if I'm only lifting 1 pound, 1 foot, and I take a whole day to do it, most of the work will be just holding the 10 pounds against gravity, not adding that little extra amount to lift it. But anyway. But where does the extra energy go to? So there's no extra energy to go somewhere. As you just said, it takes more energy. That means more energy is going to be converted into heat. Because that's basically what happens when you use energy by our standards of use. So, I could argue if two things collide and they crush, okay, and they bend and crush and do all kinds of stuff, that's a conversion process. Okay, it looks like, well, it's doing work. No, it's making heat. It's just the way you make heat is to bend the metal, okay, to break the metal, to do things to it. That's how you make energy go into heat. If they bounce off of each other and they fly off perfectly fine, they don't bend anything, they don't make any heat, well, then all the energy is still linear motion. But either way, all the energy is still in the environment. It's still going somewhere. So it's either going somewhere and the object's still moving, or it's going somewhere and some other object's moving, little bits moving, little pieces of matter moving. I just dropped my spring. I'll need that for later. Hello, spring. I shouldn't whistle. Probably cause some kind of other disaster. It's very complicated living here. Anyway, living is complicated. I don't find anything about it all that enjoyable lately. Terrible pain in the ass. Anyway, so it doesn't go anywhere in the sense that it's always going somewhere. The energy never dies. It's always on its move. It can't use it up. You can borrow it. You can't use it, I guess, is a way of saying something. You certainly can't finish it. You can't complete it. You can't, you can't use it up. You can only borrow it up. All right, I think you are forced to say that it is turned into heat. Yes, I already said that. Yeah, that's right. Um, but it's in terms of, you could argue it's different kinds of motion, right? You can have motion in the atmosphere and call that heat, or heat in the objects themselves and radiant. You could talk about heat that's going to move through the atmosphere, or heat that's going to be radiant, and move without an atmosphere. So there's lots of kinds of heat. But if the energy is turned into heat, then he puts this in capitals. It is not used to lift the mass. Yeah, it is. Okay, so the process of lifting against the gravity and against the atmosphere, okay, that's the part where you lose a little bit to the atmosphere. But obviously you didn't make heat in the object you're lifting. The heat was made inside your body doing the lifting. So you have to say, obviously that's where the heat was created. It can't do both, he says. When obviously, of course, it does both. There's no both anyway, right? There's just your body getting hot. Your body doesn't get dented or deformed or some other kind of crap. It just gets hot. Anyway, so the time is irrelevant. So says you, obviously, nonsense. It's about distance. Well, of course it's not. And it's just amazing that you have to keep doing this. I mean, I'm just saying the argument is, in my opinion, where's the counter argument? So I'm just going to stop right there as soon as we're on this distance thing. I'm just going to do it again. I'm just going to point out how I can't understand what the fuck you're talking about. It can make zero sense to me to talk about the distance, okay, when every single force that we can find that does the same thing, that is wind or water or photons or paint spray, every single other force that would hit something at a constant rate, cause a constant rate motion, just like that. So those are little windmills blowing at the same rate. The same force is being created. One cart is half as massive as the other cart, and it goes twice as fast. Okay, it's perfectly consistent with Newtonian physics in the sense that it's saying twice the force, twice the motion, or the same force applied to half the mass, which is the same thing as twice the force. Yes, twice the velocity. It's conserving mv. All right, it's basically saying force equals the change in the momentum, and that's exactly what it's showing. Force equaling the change in the momentum, not ma. P. Period. Change in your momentum. All right. So. Alright, so I can do this with either rolling things, or I can do this with dropping things. So, doesn't matter which way we draw it in a sense. So, let's just use for this one the rolling example, because I haven't done that in a while. And so you're saying it's the distance, okay, decides the energy. And a clear argument is that no, it doesn't. Okay, so if I roll, okay, an object, so it's going to roll from point A to point B. And so I give it twice the velocity. It will roll 4 times as far. But I can see exactly why it's going to roll 4 times as far in the fact that I know this is what 1v looks like. So I know it's going 1v at this location. All right, so 1v, which is 1/2 of the original velocity. All right, so why would I make up some story, okay, that distance has something to do with it, when clearly, okay, this is half the energy here, and this is going to be half of it here. This whole thing is going to take 1 unit of time. This whole thing is 1 unit of time. So this is 1 time, and this whole thing is going to be 1 time. Okay. So whatever's pulling the energy out, right? In both cases, the energy is being extracted by the ground. That's the big player. And the simple argument is the ground, at a higher velocity, the ground pulls less out because the weight is making less contact. So it's making good electrical contact here, you could argue. So it's pulling electrons out, if it was electrons. You could sort of understand it's good, it's weak content, so it's very little being pulled out, and the heavier it is, that is, the more contact it has with the surface per unit of time, the more electrons it pulls out. So it pulls out the same total amount of heat here as is in here. Same thing. And it's only 2 units of heat. Okay, that's all it is, 2. Okay, and 1 here. 1 heats. And it makes perfectly good sense. And it's the same argument for dropping things. So I drop, 4 times the height. I only get twice the velocity. It's only in the gravity twice the time. So twice the time, twice the velocity makes perfectly good sense. It's going half its velocity way up here. Again, after only 1/4 of the trip, it's already going half its velocity. Clearly, it's not going to gain anything from this distance, but 1 unit of gravity. It gets 1 unit per 1 second. 1 second, 1 unit. 1 second, 1 unit. 1 second, 1 unit. That's Galileo, and that's Newton's physics. So until you can draw me a picture where I said something in here that's wrong, we really don't have anything to talk about, do we? I don't understand you. I can't understand your argument. I can't understand how it possibly can make sense or it works. I don't see any example of 25 times the fuel to go 5 times as fast, so you can't show me any of this crap working. You can't show me it working with a rocket in space. You can't show any example of it working. Can't show me where it is in the ballistic pendulum. Can't show me a lever failing to function. Can't show me pulleys failing to conserve momentum. So everywhere it fails. And you're making this arrogant argument to me that somehow I have to account to you. I don't have to account to you. You have to account to me from my perspective. You're the one stating the thing that I see no evidence of. And I can just keep pointing at things like that and saying, well, where are you saying the force is uneven in those 2 objects? They have the same force, and there's no resistance to motion. The half mass isn't resisting. It's not showing any signs of having twice the inertia. It's not stopping moving. It's not being prevented from moving. And I could just run the one where it's 4-to-1 mass ratio, and the thing's going 4 times as fast. Perfectly conserving the momentum and perfectly ignoring any notion of kinetic energy meaning a damn thing. Or shouldn't mean anything. Shouldn't. Because there's no evidence of it. All right. So he says it's about distance. Okay, so I just pointed out how... No, it isn't. yeah. Okay, and to give a mass twice the speed when dropped, you must lift it 4 times as high. Yeah, so what? Lifting it 4 times as high will only require twice the velocity. So let's understand, twice the velocity will go 4 times as high. So clearly, you're arguing that twice the velocity is somehow 4 times the energy. That's the experiment you don't have a good one for. Right? The Mythbusters couldn't find it. And again, if you do it realistically, you should be producing the 3 times as fast makes 9 times the work. That's the one you need to show us. All right, because we know it gets fudgy when you start pushing things with springs and they're not perfectly efficient and all of that crap. But you haven't even come close. And it shouldn't be outside your reach to be able to show me it taking 25 times the fuel to move something 5 times as fast. And it shouldn't be outside your reach to show me something going 5 times as fast doing 25 times the work. And yet in 350 years you produce 0 evidence. And then you say, I'm an asshole for not believing in your story? Yeah, no, I don't believe in stories that have no evidence. And you have no good physical evidence. It's just a fact. It's just a story you tell. All right, which means putting in 4 times the energy. So you don't have to put in 4 times the energy. You're saying it's 4 times the energy, go twice as fast. I'm saying you don't have any experiment proving that. All right. So then I said, I can only counter by saying there's no evidence it takes 25 times the fuel to go 5 times as fast. Nor is there any evidence that 5 times as fast is 25 times the work. Okay. You say it is not used to lift the mass. The counter argument was made 400 years ago, I should say by Descartes, okay, and states that energy is eternal and can't ever truly be used. Energy just moves from object to object. It can be captured and released, but never destroyed. So that's probably a good way to say it, captured and released, okay, because that's all there is. You can capture it, keep it in a fish tank for a while, then you're going to have to let it go again. You'll never die. It'll outlive you every time. Okay. You say you collect gravity in units of distance. I argue that all constant forces have been proven to be collected in units of time. So you collect wind in units of time, you collect paint in units of time, you collect sun in units of time, you collect water currents in units of time, you collect wind in units of time, you collect sandblaster sand in units of time. So again, all of it is in units of time. And gravity does exactly what those forces would do if you use those. So if you drop something against a wall and you used wind to blow it into the wall to create friction, you'd get exactly the same result as if it was gravity pushing it into the wall. All right, your physics doesn't land a man on the moon. Newton and Galileo's time-dependent theory did. All right, so he responds with crap, of course. All right. So he says, by your standards, is there any evidence for anything? So I don't even know how to answer that. I should have just said, what the fuck is that question? What do you mean by my standards? I'm saying give me some kind of evidence and I'll be fine. Let's, show me something like that. Show me a piece of evidence like that. Okay, but you show me the one where the half mass actually goes 1.4. So you say the lever produces 1.4. The same force ends up just producing 1.4 instead of 2. So I use half the mass on a lever and I only get 1.4. I'm gonna get I lose 1/3 of the momentum because of something called inertia. Well, you show me that. That's your obligation, jackass. I'm gonna say fucktard, I'm gonna say asshole, because he does get rude here. All right, I argue that all constant forces have been proven to be collected in units of time. So that was my quote. Yes, force times time gives you the change in momentum. Yes, exactly. And frankly, that's all there is. You're saying there's something else happening. You say there's something other than mv. You're saying that v's are squared. I'm saying I can't see it. I don't see any evidence. Why should I square a v? There's absolutely no reason to square a v. There's no concept of a squared voltage. There's no concept of a cube of voltage. Voltage doesn't, velocity doesn't come in those units. You can't make a square of velocity. It's silly. Okay, and if you accept this, which of course I'm saying, yes, I have accepted mv. You've accepted some notion that velocity is squared. I haven't accepted that silly notion, so why should I believe it? All right, you can't avoid force times distance. Well, sure I can. Giving you the change in kinetic energy, the change in hobgoblin force, the change in Mary Poppins kisses, the change in Smurf money. It's all, you're just talking baby talk, this kinetic energy. You have no evidence it ever does anything anywhere. That it's ever done any work. You have no evidence it ever does any work in this universe. Ever. Okay, and this is true for any force, not just constant forces. So it's not true for any force. Obviously, variable forces are not going to behave the same as constant forces, so it's just ridiculous to make that argument. All right, your physics didn't land a man on the moon. Newton and Galileo did. Okay, and he says, how would you know? Well, back in my day, okay, it was sort of a famous thing that NASA said about the moon landings. While they were taking place and after they were took place, was that they just used Newtonian mechanics. Now, they were basically arguing they weren't using Einstein's theory, but the truth is they weren't using Leibniz's theory. The fact is, measuring the kinetic energy of the thrust of a space ship won't get you any useful information, so it wouldn't even be in the computer that landed on the moon, because it couldn't produce anything called useful information. Knowing the kinetic energy would do you absolutely no good in being able to land on the moon, because you won't get any commensurate response from your spaceship. Your spaceship won't have an equal and opposite reaction to the kinetic energy. It'll only have an equal and opposite reaction to the momentum. Again, demonstrating that the only thing that's real is the momentum, and that your silly fable is just that, a silly fable about some sort of extra sparkly, fun, scalar poof-poof energy. All right. You don't even know how simple springs work. So fuck you. Okay. So, fuck you. We're done. We're done have any kind of civil conversation. Okay. Because obviously I'm the one who's made a video about how springs work. More than one of them. Explaining the fact that they have all these frailties. These frailties that none of you cunts have admitted. So none of you little poofy, weak, okay, girly physicists have been able to even acknowledge, okay, those truths about how springs function. All right, rockets are a bit more complicated. So again, there's no complication here. We know it doesn't happen, okay? It doesn't matter whether you're using bricks as fuel or you use nuclear energy. It doesn't matter how you do it. It will never, ever, 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 calculating the kinetic energy of the thrust will never be useful information. So I'm not going to watch the video because it's an insensible point. There is absolutely no evidence that anything other than equal and opposite happens in space based on your momentum. There's no equal and opposite for kinetic energy. It doesn't obey Newton's third law. It isn't part of Newton's physics. It isn't real. It's that simple. So I have no reason to acknowledge any kind of bullshit. It doesn't matter what kind of fuel use you'd have and, oh, your object's getting lighter. None of that will fix the calculation. None of that will make your lunar module using the calculation of the kinetic energy of the thrust. If you use the calculation of the kinetic energy of the thrust, you will crash every fucking time. And that's the absolute truth. And anybody who knows anything about physics knows that's the absolute truth, because anybody who knows anything about physics knows it's true that kinetic energy doesn't obey Newton's third law. That's why you can have guns in the first place. That's why guns can happen. That's how you can make it, it's possible for you to have a bullet that has 2,000 joules of fucking energy in it, and you can have a gun recoil of 2 to 2,000. You can have that a system that uneven where 2,000 went this way and only 2 went that way. Well, obviously that's not obeying Newton's third law. Obvious fuckingly. And obviously the momentum is perfect though. The momentum of the bullet is 2 and the recoil of the gun is 2 in momentum. It's 2 grams times 2,000 velocity, and then it's 2,000 grams against 2 velocity. So the momentum works perfectly. Kinetic energy fails catastrophically, indicating, of course, Newton didn't believe. Newton wasn't a Leibnizian. Gee, I have to say that to fucking high school educated motherfuckers. I have to say these words, which is amazing. That Newton was a Newtonian. Yeah, I have to actually defend that position. Ugh, it's just, I hate this planet. I hate these scumbags. All right, so he said, by your standards, is there evidence for anything? And I said, by my standards, there's no evidence for a God, and there's no evidence for V squared energy. So that's all I knew how to answer to his question was, yes, there's evidence. But you have to show me some. You can't just claim things. You have to show it. And there's no evidence that there's a God, and there's no evidence of scalar hobgoblin energy. Okay? Your scalar energy notion that there's some sort of fucking energy that's not going in any fucking direction, and it's just some magical, sparkly, glitter inside of objects is, to me, baby talk. So yeah, I can't make any fucking sense out of it at all. It's wooey nonsense. All right, so I say, I argue that all constant forces have been proven to be collected in units of time. So, and then he said his bit, and I said to that, so he says, yes, force times give you the change in momentum, and if you accept this, you can't avoid force times distance. I said, I can avoid it just as I can avoid believing in hobgoblins. All right, and this is true for any force, not just constant forces. And I said V squared is true for nothing. Okay, there's just no evidence it has any role to play in this physical universe ever. It can't even move a grain of sand in space. Your physics didn't land a man on the moon. Newton, Galileo, blah, 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 blah. How would you know? He says, There's lots of quotes from NASA saying so. Okay. You don't even know the simple spring works. And I said, you don't even know you smell like ass. Okay. Rockets are a bit more complicated. I said, kinetic energy doesn't obey the third law. You lose. I mean, right there, it should be over. Okay, you're claiming there's an energy that is significant, but it doesn't have to obey the third law. So the third law might as well not be a law. Why the fuck would it be a law? Why would you even consider it meaningful if the most important thing in the universe, energy, doesn't obey it? So if the most important real energy, which is the sparkly scalar energy, doesn't obey the fucking law, why the fuck are you talking about this stupid fucking silly law? If nothing obeys the fucking silly law. Your important energy doesn't. All right, let's see if there's anybody here. Let's see. Scalar energy is just like Leibniz's monad theory. It is Leibniz. It's not just like it is. Yes, that's exactly where it came from. It's crap. Duh. I'm sorry. Yes, Yes, it's a true statement, but you can't even. It's like saying water's wet. It's so obvious. Newton wasn't a Leibnizian, right? How many times do I have to say that over and over again, right? I guess that's all it comes down to. I have to just keep saying over and over for the rest of my life, Newton wasn't a Leibnizian. Newton wasn't a Leibnizian. Newton was a Newtonian. Newton was a Newtonian. Yeah. I mean, it really is that ridiculous. I mean, that's how fucking silly this fucking conversation with these fake science lovers is. These people don't love science. They love religion. They don't have any concept of the truth and wanting to find it and what it takes to find it. I mean, obviously you have to be a belligerent lying sack of shit to say Newton was a Leibnizian. He wasn't. And his physics worked. Momentum goddamn worked. It didn't need to be fixed. Momentum wasn't broken. I mean, that's a hard statement for you to refute, I would imagine, right? Momentum wasn't broken. There was no place where, oh, we need to fix momentum is completely fucked. I mean, for 2,000 years, Archimedes' theory is that this momentum is conserved and this works, but it completely fails. No, that wasn't the impression. Everybody had the impression that momentum worked perfectly well. It wasn't failing anywhere. There wasn't some obvious, holy shit, this experiment proves momentum fails. There wasn't any such experiment, you fuckers. So, I mean, it is that bad. All right, so this asshole says some other shit that I didn't bother responding to, so I'll just read it. By my standards, there's no evidence for a God, blah, blah, blah. So that was me. That's not what I asked. What do you mean? What did you ask? You said, is there any evidence? And I said, I don't know what that, how is that even a question? Is there any evidence? Huh? Yeah, that doesn't. So what was your evidence? Where did you show me the 25 times thing? You didn't show me any evidence of the 25 times thing. All right, yeah, you certainly didn't show me any evidence of being 100 times the fuel to go 10 times as fast. Why don't you show me that one? Or 1,000 times the fuel to go 100 times as fast, right? It just gets 1,000,000 times to go 1,000 times. It just gets worse and worse for you assholes. All right, I can avoid it just like I can avoid believing in hobgoblins. Please give us an example where force times distance does not equal the change in kinetic energy. So again, there is no kinetic energy. I don't know why you keep telling me I have to believe in this v squared concept. Go ahead. You think there's such a thing as v squared. I'm saying, where is it? How do I don't know how to form that as a rational thing to do to a velocity. I don't see any reason to ever put a square on a velocity. This goes straight over your head, doesn't it? Yes, it goes straight over my head. I have no obligation to believe in what you're doing to momentum. You're saying momentum isn't momentum. Momentum is mv squared. You're saying energy is mv squared. I'm saying there's zero evidence that has anything to do with that v squared. There's all kinds of evidence that has everything to do with just the m and the v. The m and the v are correct. You putting that squared thing on there is garbage. Just like squaring 9.8 meters per second squared. Just how that is a big fucking lie. Because it's 9.8 meters per second over 1 second units. It's in 1 second units. You only get 9.8 in 1 second. It can't be 2 seconds. Can't be 1.7 seconds. Can't be any other number but a 1 second. For fuck's sake. Are you denying that truth? You're saying that 9.8 meters per second squared is the same thing as saying 9.8 meters per second of velocity per 1 second. You're saying those two things are the same thing. I'm saying that's insanely, insipidly silly. You can't do that to the statement. That's not saying the same thing. That's saying something completely fucking different. God, you people are such scummy liars. All right. There's lots of quotes of NASA saying so. You didn't provide any such quotes. Yes, I'm not going to bother. Right, you can do the research if you like. You haven't bothered to do any research. Do you know who Leibniz was? Have you researched who Leibniz was? Have you read his monad and soliton theory? Have you read his objections to both Descartes and Newton, calling them both atheists? Yeah, have you read that shit? Nut for fucking brains. All right. Let's see. You don't know you smell like ass. The video link provided you. The video link proved you wrong, and now you're mad. Nice. Now, there was no proof of anything wrong, so let's go find the video link. The rocket engine fuel bullshit doesn't have anything to do, again, with the argument. So even if you made the source of the energy weightless, that is, like nuclear power or something, you could almost argue that, you could use batteries in space or something else, and the amount your battery gets lighter would be so irrelevant that it wouldn't have anything to do with changing any of this. So let's see what the stupid link was. Not going to be relevant or meaningful. Oh, no, we're not watching Dispar's silly spring video. So look at these springs. You can see it right here in this beginning even. Look, that they're all compressed on top of each other sideways. Sideways. They're all side. Look at them. Look at this shit. Look at this shit. So he's doing this with springs. So he's saying it takes as much energy to do this, compress a spring on one side, as it takes to do this. Compress them evenly. This moron's saying that's the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. This is a shit experiment. It's a dirty, filthy piece of crap. And that's all this moron can produce. So I am going to block you because you shouldn't be... You're just... There's no... I have no obligation to respond to these lying, slandering asswipes. This fucking piece of garbage, this human garbage, I've proven his experiments wrong. Okay, did a silly milk carton experiment, never took it down. Okay, did this stupid experiment with the stupid rubber bands, never took it down. So he doesn't care when you prove him wrong. He doesn't care what the absolute facts say. He just leaves his live videos up. So yeah, fuck you. This is not relevant physics. It's garbage. All right, enough of that. So what the fuck did that, how the fuck did that piece of shit video prove a motherfucking thing? So he says here, how would you know? You don't even know how springs work. Rockets are a bit more complicated. So he was arguing that this is how springs work. That springs actually collect the same energy over and over and over again. So if I put enough springs on top of each other, and I put 5 pounds on the spring, if I put enough springs on top of each other, I can collect 500 pounds of weight. So if I take 100 springs, right, and I put them on here, I can put 5 pounds on and I can collect 500 pounds of pressure. That's what they're arguing. And I'm supposed to respond to nonsense that's silly? That somehow I can make 5 pounds weigh 500 pounds? No, I can't. Ugh, idiots. You can only collect the weight on top of the spring. That's all you can put in the spring is that much tension. You can't put any more tension than that in it. So you can stack springs all day long, but each spring can only be holding a tiny amount of the pressure because it can't make more than 5 pounds of weight. That's all 5 pounds can weigh is 5 pounds. It can't weigh any more than 5 pounds, moron. Oh, these people are so obnoxiously stupid. All right. Kinetic energy doesn't obey the third law. You lose. So right there, I have won with that statement. So he says, I never said it does. Well, it has to. How can it be real energy if it doesn't obey a law? So what are you saying? Either you say that Newton's third law isn't a law, and it's not even relevant because momentum isn't relevant. So why are we paying any attention to even the third or the second law for that matter? Why should either one of them be relevant if they don't say anything about kinetic energy, which they both don't do, by the way. All right, so he says, why should it? It's a law governing the transfer of energy between objects. And you're saying the law doesn't have to be met. What do you mean? Why shouldn't it? Why are we talking about Newton's third law then? Why don't you all just agree to say we don't believe it's relevant? We don't think Newton's third law was wise or meaningful or should be part of the conversation because, real energy doesn't care about that silly rule. Say something like that, you liar. See, they don't have any courage. They don't have the courage to actually take responsibility for their silly opinions. So they actually think Newton was wrong, but they won't say it. They're such fucking cowards. All right, you are the one disagreeing with the third law. So this is just idiotic. There's absolutely no way you can convert the third law, equal and opposite reaction, into some statement that it's not about the reaction called the scalar reaction. The scalar transfer of energy, the real transfer of energy, the real thing called energy. To pretend it's about something else is ridiculous. All right. And still calling yourself a Newtonian. Yes, obviously. So again, this is just so disgusting that they would do this to Newton. That they would pretend that Newton was actually a Leibnizian. His worst enemy in life, they would slander him with, in his death. They'd put him on a bicycle built for two with Leibniz when it was his most hated human being on Earth. And you're not even joking. So yeah, and you're not even joking. You really think you have a right to just slander the greatest scientist in history. And it just shows how you don't give a fuck about science. That you're not here for the scientific conversation. It's not part of the agenda. Okay, so you two, both of you little fuckers can go to hell. Just fuck off with your bullshit. You have no evidence that springs, that I can stack springs and I can collect multiples of the weight of an object by putting more and more springs underneath the object. So if I put 1,000 springs underneath 5 pounds, I can collect 1,000 times 5 pounds worth of energy. No, I can't. You're fucking idiots. That should have done it. Let's see, did it? Maybe I hid myself from the channel. Who knows? Okay, well, fuck you. God, these people are so despicable. This is human garbage. That's all there is on this planet. Garbage humans. Alright, terrible. I'm not sure how to even imagine that science has gone this bad. Yes, I pointed this out in his comments. His meaning who? People are so hostile for defending momentum when it works. So hostile for defending momentum when it works. I don't know what that exactly that means, but I guess you're saying they're just hostile to the evidence. Okay, and the glaring evidence. Like I said, this is not complicated. This is exactly what I always expected from the day I hatched on this planet, right? Is that, yeah, the same force, if it's twice as light, it's going to go twice as fast. If it's 1/4 as light, it's going to go 4 times as fast. Oh, that's just so fucking obvious. That's how it works. And why should I believe differently? What's the good piece of evidence, like this piece of evidence, showing me I shouldn't believe that? They don't have that good piece of evidence. They just make the claim. Again, like they're claiming levers don't work. They're claiming the law of the lever, the 2,000-year-old law of the lever, doesn't actually work. That all that time people were being fooled somehow by the fact that it worked perfectly, that it made perfect sense, and they were fooled by that. Okay, and they have the glaring evidence of, oh, that's right. They don't even have like a fossil impression of anything. They don't have the footprint. They don't have a fingerprint. They don't have anything indicating that there was anything wrong with the law of the lever, that it didn't work. They have zero evidence of the lever failing. Just amazing. The only thing there's evidence of is springs failing, in the sense that springs collect energy really well. They don't give it back very well, once they are detached from the object they're pushing, they not quite as efficient as they should be. They're not efficient. They're not perfectly efficient. And that simple fact is a big, simple fact. Gigantic, simple fact. Really disappointing. All right, so I guess we'll do some slit videos, I suppose. So I'll go find those. And there was just one that was just so visually good that I figured I would show it just because it's so visually good. Yeah, it's a beautiful image.
This holiday, Verizon is giving you incredible gifts and savings you'll enjoy all year. When you switch, you'll get 4.
Fuck yourself. All right, this should be it. All right, so this is in physics demo, so I don't know why I missed this somehow. I don't know exactly how I did that, but I did it. So I have to change this, and then I have to change back to that. I have to change that, then change to that, then do this. And that should be it. And if I turn that on, there it is. Okay. So you can see magnificent clarity almost, in terms of just a beautiful image of the double slit. And the facts of how this is being created is just so, I mean, not to, I've been saying this for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years now that I figured this out. And just no concession to the beautiful clarity of it, how perfect the explanation works in terms of explaining. So I actually can use I can invert my, and put that below that. Yeah, so I should be able to do this. Filter, chroma key. Alright, that should work. And then I should be able to put camera above the picture. And then I should be, look at that, it works. Cool. Alright, now I should be able to move this image. Sorry, it takes time to get all this stuff figured out. Alright, that should be good enough. So, this is the true and real double slit experiment. And what they do, because they're sneaky lying scum, is they'll say, oh, do the experiment this way, right? So have a slit so infinitesimal that you can't, it's not even a wavelength of light. It's so thin. And what that does is takes away these two sources. So you can't make vector lines from these two sources. This surface and this surface are so close together that you can't make a line longer to any location anywhere in the universe. You just can't. A wavelength longer. So it means you've converted the 4 surface experiment, or the true 2 slit. You've taken away 2 of the sources. And so now you're back to having a single slit. So if you actually do it with the infinitesimally small slits, you won't see this pattern. All you'll see is either you'll see one pattern, and what it'll be is it'll be this single slit pattern. So this is what you'll see. You'll lose the little dots. This is what you'll see. So that's their big lie. They do the experiment where they're claiming it's a 2-slit experiment, but it's really not, because they're going to create a single slit pattern. This is a single slit pattern. No little dots. See? No little dots means single slit. So when there's no little dots inside the pattern, that's a single slit. And that's what they did. They turned the double slit into the single slit. And so the simple argument is, if you do this right, so if all I have to do is just open those slits up, all right, and then I'll have that pattern. Okay, I'll have the real double slit pattern. And the way I'm going to get that pattern is that this distance from here to here, all right, that's the distance that's going to decide where every single one of those little dots is. So the little dots are being created by these 2 vectors. See, these 2 vectors go, and wherever these 2 vectors hit, that's a little dot. So there actually is a little dot right here in this dark spot. It's just 1/4 the brightness. Okay, so there's one right here, right? And there's one right here. It's still there. The little dot is still there. It's just that it's 1/4 the brightness, so you can't see it because it's gotten washed out by the brightness here. So if you could make this darker, I mean, if you could, if you could change the aperture on the camera, you would see there's a little dot there. Okay, and there's a little dot in that other blank spot. So it's not nothing. There's a something there. And the key difference is that's the place where, obviously with this single slit envelope, okay, that's the place where the dark is. That means they're not in sync. So it's the same thing as saying that these two sources are hitting the spot, but these two sources are not a wavelength. They're not a multiple of a wavelength in phase. So only two sources hit that spot. Two sources. And all the rest of the little dots is where 4 sources hit. And it also shows you how there's a huge unevenness, right? I mean, the dark spots are tiny compared to the light spots, right? I mean, that's pretty easy to see in the envelope pattern, is that the dark and the lights don't have any proportion to each other. So this really is just about going in phase and going out of phase. There's no hard lines here. There's just this soft idea of in phase and out of phase. And clearly it's easy to see that the completely out of phase is only one tiny little spot, okay, not half, So that's another thing to recognize, is that the photon can be pretty substantially, can have a lot of out of phaseness and still be considered a photon. So it doesn't have to be perfect to be a photon. It doesn't need this line to be a perfect 1 wavelength or 2 wavelengths. It can be a little bit off and you'll still get a lot of photon recovered. But it's clearly about the surfaces. The surface math gets completely accurate, in terms of describing that pattern. And then, you can take it a step further and even start talking about what is this double maxima. And, it's kind of obvious what's happening, because if you actually count the dots, it's always an odd number. So whatever that is, 21, it's going to be some kind of odd number. And it's always just going to be a multiple of 2 of the other things minus 1. So this would be 11 and 11. 11 plus 11 is 22. Minus 1 is 21. So it's how it always works, because all this center is the fact that the experiment has 2 sides to it. It has, what the hell is that? Yeah, this one goes this way. It's got this experiment, okay, and this experiment. So there's 2 arcs here. So they're not the same circle. If I was to draw the circles, they'd be a little bit off, in terms of their spread. And so what's happened here with the central maxima, all this is 2 nodes that have spread over each other. So all the nodes are the same size. It's just that these 2 and this one in the center has spread over itself. One of the nodes is being shared by both sides because of this little bit of procession, you could argue, in the circle created by the focus. So the focuses are less than a ½ millimeter away from each other, all right, and those are creating 2 different patterns, 2 separate patterns essentially. And the fact is their centers are overlapping a tiny bit. So they're same node sizes. That's, there's so many little things, like I said, the rest of these details I could go over, in terms of explaining it all. But I mean, it's clearly not what they claim it to be. It's clearly not, the math for waves doesn't work. So if I did this experiment honestly, right, and they said it was waves coming out of the 2 slits, if you took that seriously when they made this pattern, right, so this is the pattern they've created. So to make this pattern, I have to have these slit openings has to be at least, I think it's 0.4 of a millimeter in this case. All right, so they have to be open. They can't be infinitesimally small to make this pattern. And so what you can glean from this is that this crap, okay, that there's 2 waves, okay, and the waves are doing this, it's provably inaccurate, okay, that the waves are doing this. It's not what they're doing, all right? because this would be the center. And if you use this distance as the center to draw your vectors, you can't make that pattern. First, you can't make the little dots, okay, at all. You have no hope. And this pattern you predict will not be the pattern you get. Okay, the nodes won't be in the right places. Mathematically, you have to use these surfaces. If you don't use these surfaces, you won't get the right answer. This math, this distance, and this distance, those are the distances that will get you right answers. This distance will tell you where the envelope pattern will be, and this distance, the widest distance, will tell you where those little dots, how many little dots there are. So if I decrease the distance, so if I increase this distance, okay, the distance between the openings, that is the same thing as expanding the distance from the two outside ones. And you can understand the same is true for the impediment. So if I make the impediment twice the size, I've now moved the outside surfaces twice as far away. And so now they're going to be, those little dots will be twice as small. So I can make them any size I want by just changing how far away those two surfaces are, the two outside surfaces. By just changing where they are, I'll change how many of those little dots there are. So I can go from 3 in the center to 5 in the center to 7 to 9 to 11. I can just keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And it works perfectly. And it explains the damn thing perfectly. And it's just sad that nobody will pay attention to that simple argument. Provable, factual argument. Drawable, explainable. It works. It is how the thing works. It's a surface experiment. The single slit is the two surface experiment. Right? And you can even say that with an aperture, right? A round aperture essentially has two opposite surfaces, always. So you could sort of argue it's the two surface experiment in the sense that there's always two opposite surfaces. But that's all it is. It's two surface experiment. And then the double slit is the four surface. And then you could say a triple slit would be the 9 surface. It just keeps going on and on. It's just about the surfaces. They're causing the effect. They're breaking the photons. And then the photons have a 50-50 chance of being thrown back in phase or out of phase. Amazing. But yes, a very nice pattern. So let's just play this video, even though it doesn't say much. It's a nice demo, that's for sure. It's probably the nicest, cleanest looking pattern I've seen.
This is a demonstration.
Okay, let me see what the volume's like here. So hard to get this right. Oh, he's still talking. Interesting. Yeah, you shouldn't do that while the
Here,
volume is off.
I'm sending it through 2 slits that are separated in the first case by 0.25 millimeters, and then in the
So 0.25, he's talking about the center impediment, I believe.
second case by 0.5 millimeters.
Right, so he's just made the center twice as big. The slit openings are 0.4, I think. He's probably going to say that.
Larger separation. In both cases, each of the 2 slits is 0.04 millimeters.
Okay, so I guess, it probably is worth drawing that just to be complete and fair and all that kind of crap. Let's see. Is the camera off? No, the camera's on, right? Yeah. All right. So, so the only part he's changing, if I was to draw the slit experiment, all right. Yeah, so yeah, there's no way. I can only draw it the 2 ways he's going to have it. Okay, so it's going to be this way, same size this way, same size here. Okay. And then the second case, this is half the size. So this is this size, the same size opening, okay, and the same size opening. So you can see that it doesn't change this width, doesn't change the opening's width, right? So this width doesn't change in the experiments, in the 2 experiments. So the envelope pattern will be exactly the same size. And what you have changed is this length, which you've made twice as large by increasing this by twice the size. Yeah. And this is 0.4. Okay. And 0.4, which is, well, it's in between 0.5 and 0.5. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how much difference it makes. So it might be 3/4, not fully twice. But the point is that obviously you have made the two end surfaces further apart. So you'll see two patterns. One of them where the dots will be like that close, and the other one where the dots will be, that close. Can't see those, unfortunately. Kind of thing. Yeah, that seems a fair way to say it, I think. Alright, turn that off and turn this back on and play the video and resize it, I guess, because frankly, yeah, you can't see the guy. So yeah, I went through all his videos. I wish he had better demos of the stuff I care about, but he doesn't. So I have played a couple of his different demos, but they're, it's too bad that he doesn't really do any of the physics. He just does these 2-minute videos, and that's a little disappointing.
Wide. So what you see now is the pattern produced by this two-slit pattern, and you can see.
So it looks like there's bigger dots, as you go further out, but they're really not. You can see they're little tiny, but they're still there. Okay, so it's just that there's 3 dots in this space, this dark space. So it's really the same number of nodes, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here. There's supposed to be 8, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, why is there one missing? Well, anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 and 7 is 14. That's even, then 1 minus 1 is 13. Okay, that's right. Yeah, they're odd. So anyway, so this looks like it's only 6 here, but there's actually 7. So, it's just that another one of them is too weak to be seen because it's getting further and further out. So there's less and less photons. So they really should always be viewed on a curved screen. Unfortunately, they don't do that, but it's really how the pattern should be viewed. But it does, in fact, stretch, for lots of geometry reasons. The nodes themselves will get bigger and bigger and bigger as they go around the circle. So as they go around the side, the same 7 dots will look this big, and up here the same 7 dots will be this big. So, yeah, just a fact of geometry.
A big bright spot here, but you
So a big bright spot is all they say, something like that, and it's like, no, it's a real clear thing, and in a water wave it won't happen at all. So water waves don't create this double maxima. So that should be understood. There's a center node in. So if I use water waves, I get a small node in the center of the same size as these nodes. So the whole thing is shifted in a completely different manner. So it's in some sense nothing like, right? It's absolutely nothing like the water wave pattern in the sense that the center is completely different. And the trick is because obviously in water you don't have a tiny opening and then broadcast it into a huge, gigantic surface kind of thing like this. So you're talking about 1 millimeter of an opening, and obviously the two vectors going the same, into each other would be inside that 1 millimeter. So there's no such thing as a non-negotiable, as Professor Lewin said, right? Professor Lewin says the center has to be an on because it's non-negotiable, because this happens. But the fact is that's happening inside of 1 millimeter. And 1 millimeter on this screen, right, if we were to be fair, let me turn the camera on again, I guess. If you're going to be fair, 1 millimeter on that image would be thinner than that line. There. 1 millimeter would be thinner than that line. So obviously what's happening inside that line would be irrelevant to this pattern, So that's the bullshit.
I'm hoping you'll be able to see that there are small divisions, maybe 10 or 12 divisions within this big bright.
Right, so he doesn't even get the part, like I said, Brozo figured this out first, that it's always odd. So it's always an odd number. So it's not 10 or 12, there's 9 or 11. but you can figure out that there's more like 14. Well, it's an odd number, so it's 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Why did it come out to be 14 again? It's not supposed to do that. Oh, that's hilarious. I missed one somewhere, so it's 15.
Spot. Those are produced by the fact that we have two slits, interference, both constructive interference and destructive interference through this region. You can also see...
So that's not, those are just baby talk words, right? There's no interference creating the pattern. And you can prove that with different experiments that nothing interferes. Photons don't hit photons. Photons don't interact with photons. In radio experiments, you can have the two sources coming from opposite directions, so there's no chance they could interfere with each other, and you'll create the same pattern. So it's just kind of nonsense to say this is about interference. This is about breaking photons on a surface. All of these fringe photons, all of these little dots going this way and dots going that way, are being created by photons that went by the surface. The bright photons in the center, the brightness in the center, is an indication of a bunch of photons that just went straight through, that didn't get fringed.
It divided out here in the other bright spots. So if we move to doubling the separation to 0.5 millimeters.
So now they're really tight. So yeah, it's not twice as much, but it's close. But yeah, I'm not going to bother trying to count all those little lines. But it looks like there's almost 14 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, it's about twice.
Then a wider separation means tighter spacing between those interference fringes.
So it does show pretty clearly that there's just missing lines here, but the lines are actually here. They haven't gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. There's just lines that you aren't seeing, okay? But they're still there. You just don't see them because there aren't enough photons, but they're still there. They're detectable. If you just change the aperture on the camera, you will be able to see them.
So you may or may not be able to see on the screen now that this main maximum is still as wide as it was before, but there's double the number of individual divisions.
Right, so you didn't change the opening size. So on the opening side was deciding the envelope pattern, and it's the total distance from the two outside surfaces that decide those little lines. So the little lines are being created by the largest distance between two surfaces. Obviously, the largest distance between the two surfaces means a lot more places where there's a wavelength of difference. That's why there's so many places. It's because the further away the 2 point sources are, the more possible places there are for there to be a wavelength of difference
within it. So the actual pattern that you can see right now is the single slit diffraction pattern.
So that's silly. It's obviously not the single slit pattern because it has the little things. The little lines are purely visible. Clearly not the single slit pattern.
For a single slit of with 0.04 millimeters. And then the divisions within that pattern that I think we'll be able to clearly see on this one is the result of the double slit pattern.
Yeah, it's the result of the fact that you now are 4 sources, not just 2 sources. There's not 2 waves. There's got to be 4 waves if you're going to use waves as a theory. And the 4 waves have to all be on the surfaces, which doesn't make any sense. So obviously it's been debunked. Wave theory has been annihilated as a reasonable explanation. And unfortunately, all the people interested in science couldn't care less to listen to the argument. I mean, I've been saying it for 4 years. They won't even hear the argument. They won't pay any attention to the argument. It's just an absolute fact that wave theory is not viable when you actually analyze the experiment and actually analyze why the math that works. The reason why it works is because the math acknowledges that the surfaces cause the effect. It's not about the opening and some wave bulging through the opening. It's about the surfaces causing a disturbance in the photon's passage. All right, that was satisfactory. Let's see if there's something else here. Paper jam. You don't need to do a paper jam. This water wave one was, might as well, because it just shows how water waves don't produce the same pattern. So this is by a Dr. Richard Walding. And, it's, like I said, it's unfortunate that there's lots of these physics videos that are, 60 seconds long, just kind of a waste of time. All right, so he's the author of New Century Physics, OUP, OOP, interference from a twin source. So it's a nice video of water waves, right? We could also do this one over here, so we'll just play a bunch of these crappy videos. There's a whole bunch of them over here. So we'll just play all of these crappy videos demonstrating it's not the same effect, because you won't see the double maxima.
With the first setting.
Okay, let's see if there's something in the chat might be more interesting. All right. Okay. People are so hostile for defending momentum when it works. I was referring to the Despar video. Okay. Your explanation of the double slit experiment is very good. Makes perfect sense. Yes, of course it does. Everything I say, it makes perfect sense, frankly. So I zoomed in on the double slit, and there are 15 nodes. Yes, okay. So look, I made the point. I mean, the fact is that how much it overlaps does change, right? So you can just say, depending on whether it's a half wavelength, say the distance was 15 between the two surfaces, 15.5 wavelengths. All right, you get it? So 15.5 would mean that centers are a little bit off. So it means that the two, when they're overlapping, they'll overlap a little tiny bit more or a little tiny bit less. So you can understand that that's sometimes what makes it visually complicated, is that center node, the actual center bit might be this thick versus half, almost invisible. So it's because they're overlapping a different amount depending on whether it's exactly an even number of wavelengths as the total distance or uneven total wavelengths. Physics has always got these little extra complications. All right. In the center, the line's in the center. Right, we got that part. Okay, thank you for doing that. But yes, it tends to always be an odd number. But like I said, it's not impossible that it could be a circumstance where you get just the right amount of, like 14.75 might produce where the node in the middle is so small you won't see it. Something like that. All right, but leave us continue.
The wavelength's fairly large. You can see the wavelength from there.
Okay, I can't really hear this video. Sorry if the sounds are way off. I can't, it's just hard to fiddle with all these different.
So that's lambda.
All right, so this is where he's showing us the wavelength of this water tank, water wave. So this is a nice little water tank. It's bobbing into the 2 points, making these waves. And what's clear is, if you look at this, there's no double maxima. All right, so the size of these things that are out of phase, one's going up while the other one's going down. That's all that's really happening, right? One's going up, the other one's going down. There's no interference beyond that obvious change in phase. So you have a phase here that's up. You have a phase up over here. You have up over here, down, down, down. So they're alternating up, down, and they're all even. Okay, and they go in the 4 directions. All right. But there's no double maxima. There's no double slit experiment in water, because the truth is there's no double pattern. There's no little dots inside of the big dots. There's no evidence of the pattern. And the math, like I said, if you use these center of the wave, look, the only way this math would work is you have to use the center of the wave. So you have to use the wave centers. You can't use something else. You have to use the wave centers. Is that still on you? You have to use this center here. And you have to use this center here. The surfaces are over here, and if they were surfaces, the surfaces won't be where these two centers are. So understand, the math for this can't be used for the math for light, because the place where the waves are coming from, the place where you have to draw the vectors to get the right answer, is the surfaces. The surfaces are causing the effect.
And you can see the antinodal lines are something like this.
Antinodal, whatever that is. So clearly, okay, in water too, the ons and offs have the same size. So the dark spots are just as big as the bright spots would be. And clearly in the photon experiment, the dark spots are tiny and the light spots are huge, right? So it's clearly not the same, right? The light spots are really big, right? The nodes are huge. The dark spot's tiny. The node is huge. The dark spot's tiny, right? Completely not the same pattern.
That's the regions of maximum displacement. As I increase the frequency, the wavelength decreases, and you'll see the antinodal.
Yes, the frequency increases. It's all this, the phase increases. Oh yes, let's use 4 different words for the same phenomenon, so we can confuse everybody.
Lines come in closer. Okay,
so you do get a nicer image at the higher frequency. Why it's more stable at the higher frequency, I don't really know, but it is.
Wavelength is now half what it was before. The wavelength is now from there to there, and you can see the antinodal lines are there and there.
Right, and they're all the same space and size and all even. So the lights and darks, right? One of those would be light, one of them would be dark, one of them would be light, one of them would be dark, and they're the same size. Clearly not representative of what happens in the other case. All right, so let's see. Let's click on one of these other ones. Let's see. This is a ripple tank. Let's see what it is. 2 minutes. Yeah, how much can 2 minutes hurt? That can't hurt us too much. Let's see what else this guy says.
So as the wavelength gets smaller, the x value from there to there also gets smaller.
Duh. Yes.
Whoever invented this tool does.
Okay, so, we didn't need that. So we'll go to this one. Let's see if we have this. So
this device is known as a ripple tank. We can show it to show a wide variety of wave phenomena, but the particular one I want to show here is interference between two sources.
Right, and this is a real thing in mediums. And so this is another argument why photons aren't a medium, because they don't do this. This isn't how photons work. It's not what photons do. It's not how the experiment functions. So again, and it's here, these people are literally proving the disconnection, and they think they're proving the connection. So that's the part that's just so outrageous, is they're claiming to prove the connection, and they're proving the disconnection. Obviously, there's an interference pattern, in the single slit. They can't make a single wave interfere with itself. They can't do the single slit experiment with water waves and get an interference pattern, a fringe pattern. Can't do it. There are no antinodes. So, these are huge giveaways that this is not the same phenomenon. And yet they're going to keep claiming it is. Scientist after scientist after scientist will keep making this false claim.
The ripple tank consists of a tank, shallow tank of water, a light here which projects through the water, and so you can actually see the ripples on the surface below. And here we have a vibrator with two arms. At the moment I've got one of them out of the water. When I turn this on,
It'd probably work better with some other kind of fluid, I would imagine. You know, where you could give, where the density or thickness of the material would cause more of an effect. So like put some kind of, you know, particulates in the water.
you'll see it produces circular waves. They simply spread out from that point there, more or less constant speed. There's a little bit of dispersion, but very little.
Yeah, yeah. So again, pointing, this is the single slit, right? So this is telling us, well, this is a single slit experiment. Absolutely no interference, no idea of making anything called fringes. So there's no on, off, on, off, on, off. Whoops. Proving the point.
Point there, more or less constant speed. There's a little bit of dispersion, but very little. And so you see the waves spread out in a circular fashion. That's not particularly interesting. It gets more interesting when we put the second source in. And now we have the two sources in phase producing ripples. One
Right. So now in the single slit in light, we're supposed to believe there's somehow two sources. It's, even though it's one slit and only one opening, that somehow it's creating two sources inside of that one opening. A preposterous thing to think. It doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense. It's crazy. It's silly. There's no way there's two. There's nothing to make the second source. So clearly it's the two surfaces that are the sources. And that's why the math identifies the surfaces as the relevant distance. They're causing the effect.
there and one there. And you can see fairly clearly what happens in this case. There are places where the waves add up, i.e. you get constructive interference. For example...
See, it sort of creates an illusion because there is actually a little gap between the ones that are in phase and the ones that are out of phase. And the little gap looks like it's a dark line, but that's not really happening. You're really just comparing, again, unlike the photon experiment, the idea is that the on is just as big as the off. So the black thing would be big, and then there would be the same size on, and then be a big giant black, and then a big giant on, and then a big black, they'd be the same size. And obviously in photons, nothing like that. But in water, that's exactly what this is. The things that look like the little lines between them, those are just an illusion because you're changed where the phases are, the pattern. But there is no such line there. That's not the off. The off isn't that little weird line. The off is the pattern next to it is the off.
Along the line perpendicular to the line joining the two, you'll get constructive interference and you'll always get a maximum. A little off to one side, you'll see that you get destructive interference. The waves are out of phase there.
Yeah, so again, it's just out of phase, in phase. They're all in phase or out of phase, and you're just arbitrarily saying who's in phase and who's out of phase. So that's part of the bullshit too. You're either representing, the fact that the two sources are hitting at the same time, and you're either, going to see it that way because you're in a perspective where you have the same viewpoint, distance.
There, they cancel out. And similarly over here, they cancel out. So there is destructive interference, there is destructive interference.
So nothing cancels out. Obviously the waves still hit the barrier, all of that still happens. Nothing got canceled. They're just out of phase.
There is destructive interference, there is destructive interference. In between, you have a maximum of constructive interference. This is a fundamental principle of the Young slits experiment we do with light.
Right, and so he says it's the Young slits experiment, and it's not, because first off, Young didn't do the experiment with monochromatic light, and it didn't come out all that clear. But clearly he didn't do the math.
However, there's an extra twist when you're doing the experiment with light that doesn't arise when you're doing it with water waves. We can change the frequency, which in turn means changing the wavelength. You see the pattern qualitatively doesn't change, but as we increase the frequency, the interference lines get closer together. We can't go too high because we burn the motor out.
Ridiculous. Yeah, we can't get a better motor. Alright, so let's see. Is this one worth doing? Wait, how many minutes is that? A minute and 42. Oh, it's going to be the same shit, so we won't bother with that one. Standing waves. No, won't bother with that. Hydrogen spectrum. Well, that might be interesting. We're not doing hydrogen at the moment, so let's just do this one. I clicked it. I'll click it again.
The next thing I want to look at is what happens to a water wave when it passes through an aperture.
Yes, which is, again, a water wave, and it's not going to be the same rules for light. And so that's the big BS part here. Let's see, we got a silly sock account kind of name here, user whatever. See what he's saying. Mr. T, so what the hell could that mean to anybody? Whoever invented this tool made a stick and hammer is genius. The stick and hammer is genius. So far, I don't think you're going to say anything useful. So I think I'll time you out for 30 minutes. Yeah, that'll be more than enough time to get you to leave. Yeah, fuck off somewhere else, moron. All right.
Well, I've fitted an aperture here, but it's rather too wide for what I need at the moment. So if I fit these sliding doors, I can make an aperture that's about 3 centimeters across.
Very exciting.
And if you now look at the screen, you can see that as the waves pass through the aperture, they spread out. This spreading out of a wave as it passes through.
Yeah, so that's called diffraction, but it doesn't mean anything because we know it doesn't have anything to do with anything diffracting. We know it just has to do with the fact that the water has friction on the surfaces, slows down, and that's all. It's just water molecules sticking to each other and obliging this bend to happen. But that's all that's happening. We know that photons don't have friction, so blah, 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 blah. But we know that this isn't an interference pattern. Okay, there's nothing changing here. The phases are all the same here. There's no phase change. No interference with the single slit in water.
Through an aperture is known as diffraction, and it's a property of all types of waves. So what do you think controls how much the wave spreads out?
The adhesion to the surface, and the wider you make the surface, the less that friction will matter because more water will just go straight through.
Well, one possibility is the width of the aperture.
Yeah, duh.
And what do you think would happen if I made the aperture smaller?
Well, if you made it smaller, you're going to get a more radiant because there's going to be more effect by the friction. The friction will dominate more. Strange that he has it go under the water. That is all weird. I mean, it's not a real barricade.
Well, you might be surprised to learn that a narrower aperture leads to more spreading out of the wave, more diffraction.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what I stated would happen because, yes, there's a lower percentage of the water goes straight through the center that's nice and flat, and a higher percentage will be on the surfaces going bendy and slowy. You'll have more slow water than fast water.
If instead I make the aperture wider,
then you'll have more fast water than slow water.
Then after it's settled down, you can see that the wave becomes less spread out.
And it's a mess. Okay, obviously. It's getting all kinds of noise in it.
The diffraction is less pronounced.
And it's almost, you could almost argue that, this is a terribly ugly bent line. And you don't have a real explanation for that except for your source having noise in it. So your source is a little noisy.
And if I were to make the aperture very wide indeed, then there'd be hardly any diffraction.
There'd be a less percentage of the slow water and a higher percentage of fast water.
Well, I'm now going to return the aperture to its original width and take a look at the effect of changing the wavelength of the wave. Now remember, I can change the wavelength by altering the frequency of the paddle using this
But your paddles are obviously pretty crappy, so this will probably be a pretty shitty image.
Control here. If I make the wavelength longer, you can see that the waves become more spread out beyond the aperture, more diffraction.
Alright, so this is kind of baby talk, this diffraction crap, so we'll just skip. Well, this is all the same stuff, right? Exploring wave motion. Yeah, we're not going to get anything out of this guy. Alright, let's go to this one. Projection screen, yeah, that's all really nice, thank you. So it's a nice tank. I mean, it's got a mirror, projection screen, nice setup. So that is interesting that he's not using points. So he's using a whole bar to create straight line waves, presumably. They are a little ugly though, frankly. Well, you'd think with that piece of equipment he could get something imaged a little better than this. It's a pretty shitty image. That was a really shitty. Yeah, God. That's terribly messy. Alright, well that sucked. Alright, so let's just do this one instead. We'll do some Professor Lewin. How many minutes? Oh, an hour and 30. That's probably too much. Well, you could jump through it, I guess. I mean, he's wrong about it all the way through, so diffraction interference. Standard wave procedure. Yeah, we've already got the point. The water waves ain't the same, so they shouldn't say it's the same if they ain't the same. Oh, look at that mess they made there. Noise in, noise out. That's MIT.
You know, I've always found it strange. People really want to save money, but are so willing to toss their hard-earned coin into...
Yeah, Professor Lewin has to put this crap on his videos. "2005, boy, it was a long time ago. Summer program of something Astrophysics Institute, lecture 17, very motivated high school students and 7 science and math teachers." Oh, how exciting. So, 17 students plus 7 teachers. So he did this performance art, I guess, because he got paid by somebody to do it. But this will be really simplistic mush.
The title of my talk today is The Mystery of Light. It's very mysterious indeed, as you will see.
I think I played this years ago.
Now, if you want to learn about light, what you really should do, you should come to MIT and take some courses. The first time that you will encounter light is when you take in your freshman year course 802. A stands for physics. It's electricity and magnetism. And when you have taken that course, you have some idea what light is. And then in your sophomore year, you take 803. That's the course, the physics of waves and vibrations, and then you have a much better idea. But then you take quantum mechanics, 804 and 805. And once you have taken quantum mechanics, you have no idea anymore what life is all about.
So anyway, it is kind of weird that he would do something. I mean, that you'd get Professor Lewin to do this performance art for such a small group of people. I mean, he's going to script this whole thing, blah blah blah. You got to wonder what the hell that's about.
And frankly, if you ask me, do you know what light is? My answer is no. No, not really. However, I can use and manipulate all those complicated equations that I've seen in all those courses. And they allow me to make certain predictions.
Right, but they don't. So that's the big lie. So they always talk about all these predictions, but they never take them, they never do them explicitly. So they never test actual predictions. They just claim, oh, it's close enough. It's here. Yeah. It's a little bit like, okay. But they never finish the job. So, it's all this fake statement that their math perfectly predicts, and it doesn't.
What light will do under certain circumstances. Does that mean that I have an understanding of it? No, but I know how to turn the crank. It is a recipe, and I know how to use that recipe.
To do what? To circularly make statements, but not to prove anything or actually accomplish anything.
Now, I will try to convince you today that light comes in the form of waves. However, that's not the whole story. I could convince you tomorrow, give another lecture tomorrow, that light is not waves, but that light comes in the form of particles.
Right. So, and you've already chosen that you're going to play this game, and on one side of that argument, even though I don't even know how you do that, because in every circumstance you're going to use it in the math as a vector. Light's always going to be a vector. Even in Maxwellian equations, it's going to be a vector. So how does the vector turn into a wave?
And that is one of the great mysteries of light, and at the end of my talk I'll say a few more words about that. But my goal today is to convince you that light comes
So how
in the
is the
form
volume?
of waves. In the 17th century, it was the great physicist and mathematician Isaac Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, who suggested that light comes in the form of particles. But my countryman, the Dutchman Huygens, he said that they came in the form of waves. So that was a key issue in the 17th century. You're probably all familiar with waves. Water waves, for instance, is probably the most familiar. If you tap on the water with a certain frequency, you get beautiful waves that propagate over the surface of the water. You can throw a pebble in a pond and you also see water waves. So waves move with a certain speed, and so we call them therefore traveling waves. And the speed varies a great deal in the case of water. The speed can be as low as 1 mile per hour, can be as high as several hundred miles per hour, depends on various things. Tsunami waves can go as fast as 500 miles per hour. Now sound is also a wave.
All right, but obviously, yes, sound does have a standard speed for efficiency. So I don't know whether they really tested that with water, frankly. That you could actually create motion in water that's comparable to the sonic boom. Who knows?
I produce sound by oscillating my vocal cords, and what they do, they produce...
So again, what is sound, right? So again, I make the argument that you don't just oscillate your vocal cords. The little hairs on your vocal cords are actually little whips, and they're actually going to move faster than the speed of sound. And it's by moving something faster than the speed of sound that you initiate the motion that you need, which is the very fast motion that creates sound. Slow agitations will be dampened into nothing. So if I move something quickly, I mean, this is such elemental physics and nobody talks about it, but if I move something slowly and it's in a medium, that is, it's connected to other things that have like magnets, or you could just imagine if it was a magnet and there was other magnets around. The faster I move it, the less these other things will be affected. And the slower I go, just like with gravity, the slower I go, the more they're going to drag on me, the more they're going to interfere with my motion. So the faster I can go, the more I go in the direction I was going, and the slower I go, the more energy I lose, to the ground, to the noisy environment. So obviously I'll lose a tremendous amount of energy. The slower I go, the more my energy dissipates, and the faster, the less it dissipates. The environment absorbs less of it. So it's just like the friction argument with a rolling ball. The faster the ball rolls, the less interaction with the environment. The slower it rolls, the more interaction. And that's the key to sound propagation. This motion isn't fast enough to cause the vibration to shoot very far. So it isn't felt very far away. But if I make it go fast, it's felt very far away.
In the air, high pressure and low pressure areas, they push and pull on the air. When something moves in this direction, compresses the air, comes in this direction, pulls on the air. So you get high pressure and low pressure areas, and they propagate out to you with the speed of sound, which is something like 760 or so miles per hour. Light is also a traveling wave. Light moves very fast, 300,000 kilometers per second.
3 million meters per second. So I like that number better. 3 million meters per second. 3 million meters per second. I mean, just gigantic number.
200,000 miles per second, roughly. The sun is 150 million kilometers away from us, so it takes the light from the sun 8 minutes to reach us. To put that in perspective, if a jet plane could fly to the sun with constant speed, then it would take 20 years to reach the sun. We have a name for these light waves. It's a very difficult name. I suggest you first hold on to your chair before I tell you the name. We call them electromagnetic waves. Not only light, but...
Yeah, so we already show our bias by defining and describing all this crap using these words and claiming the words are our words and we own them. So the word energy now means kinetic energy. It doesn't mean motion and movement as energy. It just means the explicit kinetic energy. It must be a V squared energy. It can't be just an MV. It has to be a V squared to be energy. So they just broke the physics and then they broke the vocabulary to make it impossible to fix the physics. You can't fix the physics because it's the speed of force, not the speed of light, right? Huge difference in understanding, right? If you understand the same speed as all the forces have the same speed, it makes it all so much more understandable that this is the same mechanism. And clear, if I say it's the speed of light, well then I've made light different and I've made all the other forces different when they're the same thing. And though they did that to energy. So even though heat is in fact momentum, it's motion, it's matter moving, it is weight, it is, it's heat, weight, force, all of them. I can't remember the other words for all the different ways to measure pressure. It's pressure, they're all the same thing. There's no reason to think there's a distinction. It's all describing exactly the same thing, the capacity of something to transfer this substance called energy, motion, quantity of motion.
There are other forms of electromagnetic waves, like radio waves and X-rays, infrared.
So again, they're all the same thing though, right? So there's no point in calling them other things and to give them all these different names because you really should understand the continuity that they're all varieties of the same thing.
UV, all members of the family of electromagnetic waves. So clearly it has to do with electricity and it has to do with magnetism.
All right, no, it just has to do with the fact that there's things called charges. So again, this is another one you could just say, oh God, how could smart people not understand this? It just has to do with charges, plus, minus, right? So once I've established plus and minus charges, right, then any time, all I have to do is move this charge to over here, and I've now completely changed where the dipole is, right? The dipole was going this way before, now the dipole is going this way. So I've completely changed the field it's creating, the lights. If this was a red light, okay, and this was a blue light, okay, where you would see purple changes depending on where I move those lights. So you could just say I can move them forward and back. The red one's further away, the blue one's closer. I can do all kinds of motions with those two objects and create all kinds of effects because I'm changing the orientation of the dipole they create. So it's this dipole that creates magnetism. It's this dipole that creates electricity. It's about moving electrons, right? So that's moving electrons is the same thing as just saying I'm going to change where the magnet is. I have a nucleus here. I'm going to have 2 electrons here in a minute, and then there are going to be no electrons after that for a minute, and then there'll be another electron there. So I'm going to constantly change the magnetic, the visible field. The field will go from being blue to being red, then to be blue again, and then red again, and then blue again. Come on, it's just so obvious, so simple. And they've turn it into this, like electricity and magnetism are 2 different things. No, they're all products of charge. Charge creates dipoles. Dipoles are electricity and dipoles are magnetism. North-south is just another way of saying plus minus.
Now you all are familiar with electricity And you probably know about magnetism. You have magnets on your refrigerators at home, no doubt. I happen to wear a magnetic brooch today. You see, this is a magnet.
Oh, it's very cute.
And it sticks very nicely. And all of that has to do with light one way or another.
It all has to do with weird, frankly.
Electricity and magnetism is what light is all about. Some of the electromagnetic waves, or most of them actually, are invisible. Light is what we can see with our eyes, but infrared you cannot see. Ultraviolet light you cannot see. Some animals can, but we cannot. However, you can feel.
You know, to say that some animals can, they don't really see it very well, though. Except for maybe insects. But, I mean, you know, creating a heat bucket, okay, and being able to tell something's hotter, that's all they can see. They can't really see an object. They just see a temperature in a direction.
Infrared light. It's the body heat that is infrared. You can feel that. So we have sensors that we can at least detect the electromagnetic waves in the infrared.
Hi, Ari. I'm your personal tutor. We have...
So again, when we do the infrared thing, though, the trick is you got to be always aware of the fact that it's all how you calibrate it. Because you can calibrate it to all kinds of different cold temperatures. So your relative temperatures is all you're doing. You're making relative comparisons.
Lots to cover today. Where do you want to start?
I don't want to start.
I have decided to put a minimum of equations on the blackboard. But there is one that is very important, because you're going to see it throughout this lecture. And so if you're ready for this, let us take a look at a wave. Here is a wave. And this could be a water wave. Or it could be a wave that you put in a string, in a violin string. And this wave is propagating in this direction. And the speed of that propagation, let's call that v.
So no point in this, because this doesn't have anything to do with a photon. Yeah, nothing. Zero. Nothing.
The separation from mountaintop to mountaintop is called the wavelength, for which we in physics give the symbol lambda. Now, in order to generate this wave, I'm going to tap on the water up and down. And
right, so we're going to do something that's not anything to do with this crap. You're going to do a node, boom, an event, boom, another event, boom, another event, boom. So why isn't your analogy to tapping on water the same as tapping on photons or making a photon? Why wouldn't it be an event followed by another event followed by another event? It's not a wave, it's an event. The cause is an event.
You can do that with a certain frequency. So I'm going to introduce the word frequency for you, for which we will write the symbol f. And that simply means how many times per second I move it up and down. It could be a string, or it could be the tapper on water. So it is the number of oscillations, oscillations per second.
I hate when they do this.
And we abbreviate that. The unit that we give that is really oscillations per second, but we normally write for that hertz, capital H, small z. And so 10 hertz means that I make 10 oscillations per second. 100 hertz means 100 oscillations per second. Now, there is another quantity, t, which is the period of one oscillation. How long does one oscillation last? It's immediately obvious that if you have a frequency of 10 oscillations per second, that one oscillation only lasts 1/10 of a second. And so therefore t, which is the period of the oscillation, of one oscillation, t is clearly 1 divided by f. So if f is 10 hertz, just as an example, 10 oscillations per second, then t is 1/10 of a second. This should not be too tough for you to handle. Very good. Now, if I move my hand up and down here, if this were a string, in capital T seconds, and if the disturbance moves with a velocity v, then the distance over which that disturbance has moved, that distance is of course v times t. And so therefore there is a key relationship between the wavelength lambda, the velocity of the wave, and the period of the wave. So in this amount of time, the disturbance has moved this far, which is our definition of wavelength. And since capital T is also 1 over f, I can also write that as v divided by f.
Yes. Well.
And this one I want you to hold on to, because that will come back during my lecture again and again and again. In the case of water, the disturbance of the water is perpendicular to the direction of propagation. You see here the mountains, and you see the valleys. They are in this direction, the water goes up and down, yet the wave propagates in this direction. And that we give that a name, we call that transverse waves. Transverse indicates that the direction of motion of the water is perpendicular to the direction of propagation. So they are traveling transverse waves.
And again, it doesn't make any difference because those waves are just an expression of the fact that without a medium, none of that would happen. And the medium is completely causing the fact that there's, that it's in a physical universe. Again, if the ocean doesn't have a floor to it, then the waves don't go up. That kind of thing. It's because you're just saying you can't make the pressure go in any direction. The water can't compress, so it can't go down just as it can't go forward. And so the only place it can go is up because that's the only place it can compress. That's the only place it can bulge the container.
In the case of sound, the situation is different because when my vocal cords vibrate, they push the air in, high pressure, and then they suck on the air, low pressure. And so there, the disturbance of the air, the high pressure and the low pressure region, are in the same direction of motion. That's why it's very difficult to make a drawing of a sound wave. And we give them a different name. We call them, therefore, longitudinal wave.
So it doesn't make much difference. It's pretty much the same effect because it can't travel unless it's got a reason to go in one direction.
Longitudinal means that the displacement of the air is in the same direction as the direction in which it moves.
I guess the better argument is that for sound, the push never stops going forward because it does compress the stuff. It's compressible. So air is compressible.
Did you know some drivers have saved up to $700 a year simply by switching their auto insurance? Most people just keep renewing their policy with
blah, 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 blah.
Light is also a traveling wave and is also a transverse wave.
Says you.
There are electric and magnetic fields that oscillate, and they are perpendicular to the direction in which the light moves.
Right, so whatever that means, right?
A row of people are waiting at
this crap about some oscillating magnetic and oscillating electric field. Somehow the field is doing something and the little thing traveling through it is being controlled by some giant fields that are all moving. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Supermarket, and at one end one person goes boom, and then the next person goes boom, and the next person goes boom, and finally at the end of the row the last person goes boom. And you see that person who was standing there did not move along the direction of the wave, but it was a disturbance that moved along the direction of the wave. So clearly sound cannot exist in vacuum. So when you see these gorgeous scientific, these movies, science fiction, and you hear in outer space a huge bang, well, that's a problem, because sound cannot exist in vacuum and cannot travel through vacuum. Light is very different. There's a big difference between electromagnetic waves, light, and in this case, the water and the sound waves. Because in the case of light, since it can go through vacuum, there is actually something that wasn't there before that now is in vacuum. And that is that mysterious electromagnetic field.
Whatever that is. So he's saying the field wasn't there before? I mean, it doesn't even make... You're talking about oscillating a field. It had to be there, and you're just oscillating it. But whatever. I mean, they can't make any sense out of this crap. Because it's not a field. It's not a medium. It's frickin' particles.
So vacuum is completely empty space. We do not need any medium there to support the wave, which we did with water and which we did with sound, not with electromagnetic waves.
Yeah, every indication is, and that's why the patterns aren't the same, and that's why you should understand they're completely different phenomenon, and you shouldn't be using the same rules to analyze the behavior because the same rules don't apply.
So even though water does never move from this position to this position, in the case of light, there is actually something, electromagnetic fields, that do move, and that make it very special. So there is a big difference in that sense, which many of you...
See, I don't know if no water moves from one location to the other. So to say no water moves, I don't think that's right. Because it does kind of go up, and then it goes down, and then it goes this way, and then it goes up, and then it goes down, and then it goes this way.
often do not appreciate. Now comes the question, of course, what is oscillating in the case of electromagnetic waves? Well, what is oscillating somewhere, without you knowing it often, something must be oscillating, and what is oscillating are electric charges. And
I mean, it has to be a larger volume of water. Let me think. You know, the first clump has more volume, and you know, because you can have the deficit behind it, but it's always more volume. Yeah, I don't know.
These electric charges produce spherical waves in all directions, just like sound. When I speak to you, waves move out in all directions. Electromagnetic waves move out also in a spherical way.
Yeah, I don't know if you have evidence that they're in all directions. I mean, I think there's real evidence that it is stronger straight ahead than it is over there. My voice is traveling better straight ahead than it's traveling that way. Yeah, it really is. There's more volume this way.
And they carry with them then this electromagnetic field, which is produced by oscillating charges. Let's try to be a little bit more quantitative and use this equation. We're going to use it for water, we're going to use it for sound, and we are going to use it for light, because those are the three substances today which are at the center of my talk. I have over there a very thin pan of water with a very shallow amount of water. There's only 4 millimeters of water in that pan. And since physics is my, not only my hobby, but is my life, I can calculate the speed of water waves when there is only 4 millimeters of water. I'm not going to tell you how I do that, but the speed of water waves...
So that's too bad in a way, right? Because the more water, the more capacity to make more of an effect, I would imagine. But I guess the waves can be more eccentric with less water. I mean, a higher by percentage of the water. Hard to say.
When you have 4 millimeters of water, that speed is roughly 20 centimeters per second, 0.2 meters per second. You have to take my word for it. If I change the depth of that water, the speed will change. If I tapped on the water with a frequency f, if I did that with 10 hertz, then you can calculate now what the wavelength will be. Lambda then is v divided by f. So that is 0.2 divided by 10. And so that is 0.02 meters, for which we would all say that is 2 centimeters. So about this much. And if I tapped with twice the frequency, so the frequency doubles, then the wavelength is twice as small, it's only 1 centimeter. And if I tap at 5 hertz, the wavelength would be 4 centimeters. And this is something that I would like to show you. Maybe nothing new. I want to remind you, without meaning to insult you, that whenever...
I wish you would show me it taking 25 times the fuel to move something 5 times as fast. That's the one I want to see. But you'll never show it because it doesn't happen.
We have a line, we call that in math 1 dimension, a violin string. If the wave moves along a violin string, that would be a 1-dimensional wave. If we have a surface,
I don't know, if we need
such
all
as
this
water,
crap, maybe we just get
then
to
the waves that
experiment.
travel over water are 2-dimensional waves. They do not just go along a line. You will see then that there is a change in the wavelength.
Thank you.
So we're going
Get to it.
show that to you there. We are tapping on there with a tapper. I want to make it dark.
This week, we're hosting a free trading and investing workshop right here in Ridgefield Park. Inside this workshop...
And I have to turn on the TV. And there you go. Well, this is nothing too exciting, but you are looking here at a 2-dimensional wave, circles that come out from the tapper. We are disturbing the water. The water itself is not moving with the wave, but it's a disturbance that moves with the wave. They move very fast, 20 centimeters per second, so there's no way almost that you can follow that, but you can see the dark and the brighter areas.
Yeah, why don't you go slower then? Yeah, why don't you do this? Yeah, why don't we do this instead? Yeah, it's much more interesting. So it's not like it moves like a hump here and a hump here. No, the hump itself moves.
Lens effect, and one of them represents no doubt the mountains, and the other represents the valleys.
There's just one mountain, and the mountain just keeps moving.
And that separation from dark to dark is roughly indeed 2 centimeters. When I look at it here, I can see it better because I don't have any magnification. It's about 2 centimeters. So we are very close to 10 hertz. If I go to much lower frequency, this is much lower than I did before, then you see indeed that the wavelength increases, still traveling, but it increases. And that was my goal, that I at least shown you a traveling wave, two-dimensional traveling wave. I don't know. That's not my intention to lower that. All right.
No, that wasn't very exciting, but okay. Now what?
So traveling wave of water.
Hello.
How about sound?
All right, let's not bother.
So
with
I can
that.
make you listen to this. That's just the way it is. But you have no idea, of course, that the wavelength is 1.3 meters. So this is a tuning fork that oscillates 256 times per second.
Very exciting.
If I increase the frequency, I go to 4,000 hertz. Then, of course, the wavelength goes down substantially. You can check that on your own now. The wavelength becomes only 8.5 centimeters, if I didn't make a mistake in my calculation. And that's a much higher frequency, so your eardrums go faster back and forth, and then the wavelength has enormously decreased. 4,000 compared to 256. So that's sound. So now, sound, by the way, is three-dimensional wave, right? It's a spherical wave that moves out in all directions. It goes in this direction, this direction, this direction, as opposed to the water wave, which is a two-dimensional wave. So let's now turn to electromagnetic radiation. Electromagnetic radiation has a speed through vacuum of 300,000 kilometers per second. It's about the same through air. Little less, but insignificant. The difference is insignificant. And so we will just write down that the speed is 300,000 kilometers per second, which is 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. I just assume that you are familiar with the notation 10 to the power 8. It's a 1 with 8 zeros. All right? And if you go from kilometers per second to meters per second, you have another factor of 1,000, and so you get 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. Well, let's take FM radio waves, frequency 100 hertz, 100 megahertz, 100 megahertz. This mega, by the way, stands for 10 to the 6. We just write that as a capital M. So let me be cleaner and write it down as 100 times a million, so that it's 10 to the 8 hertz. So the wavelength, lambda, is V divided by F, is 3 meters. So the wavelength of your typical FM radio station is 3 meters. Radar, which would be 10 gigahertz, 10 billion oscillations per second, would give you a wavelength of only 3 centimeters. Peter is quite familiar with radar. How about light? If we have light, I will tell you a secret, and the secret is that I happen to know the wavelengths of light. Remember, I was going to convince you that light is going to be waves. Now, anything that is a wave has a wavelength. And so,
So again, convenient wavelength word, you know, when it's really just a length of the frequency or the period. So it should be a period length, not a wave length.
if I tell you this secret that light, not all colors have the same wavelengths, but roughly the wavelength of light is about half a micron, and a micron is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So the wavelength of light is then roughly...
Why would he say this? I don't even know why he's doing this. I mean, obviously 300 nanometers and 500 nanometers is a big difference.
Roughly 5 times 10 to the minus 7 meters. It's half a micron. Many people like to express the wavelength of light in terms of nanometers, which is 10 to the minus 9 meters. Then it would be 500 nanometers. You see both in books. Some people like it to express it in terms of angstroms, and it is 5,000 angstroms. Whatever you prefer, be my guest. But in meters, and since I work with meters here, it is 5 times 10 to the minus 7 meters. So I told you this. So now we can calculate the frequency. Because the frequency now follows from our famous equation. The frequency now equals the velocity divided by lambda. And so the frequency equals the velocity divided by lambda. So that is 3 times 10 to the 8th divided by 5 times 10 to the minus 7. And that is about 6 times 10 to the 14 hertz. 6 times 10 to the 14 oscillations per second. So there are charges, without you knowing it and without my realizing it, which oscillate back and forth, 6 with 14 zero times per second. And that's a...
So that's not necessarily true, because what's really oscillating is different electrons. So you're just saying the difference is in the timing between when this electron moved and when this electron moved and when this electron moved. So if I'm just measuring the timing between those electrons, it doesn't mean each electron moved that quickly. It means that one moved, and then another one moved, and then another one moved, and another one moved, and when you add up all the movements, all those electrons, then you get that total. So that's another place where they kind of give you this deceptive idea that the photon itself is created by one single electron, when no, the photon is a composite object created by a surface.
Very representative number for light. In the case of blue light, it's a little higher. In the case of red light, it is a little lower. So now, how can I demonstrate?
So it is a crazy frequency. In terms of a frequency, I mean, it's whatever it is, double gigahertz or whatever. I mean, it's, you know, monstrously quick.
Demonstrate this now.
But it's not one object creating that quickness.
I demonstrated water for you. We were tapping 10 times per second. And then we went up to an unimaginably high number of 256 times per second, even 4,000 times per second. How on earth can I go up now to 10 to the 14 times per second? Well, I don't have to do anything. Just look around you. All the light that you see is generated by charges that are oscillating. So this is the easiest demonstrations for me as I can think of.
No, so that's the good part, right? It's the only part that they make any sense about is that they say charges. Well, it's only negative charges first, because that's the only thing we can move with light is the negative charges, the electrons. So it's clearly just the electron force. If you were to say there were any other forces. The point is, it's only electron motion that is related to the creation or propagation of photons. So it's just electrons doing this.
This is the story of the One. As a lineman, it's his job to keep the power on. That's why he chooses Grainger for professional grade products and next day delivery.
You fucker. I don't know why. Yeah, just.
So there are charges that are oscillating with these frequencies, and they produce the light. Now, whether light consists of particles, as suggested by Newton, or whether they consist of waves, as suggested by my countryman Huygens.
Yes, Huygens and Leibniz, and, you know, so at least he understood that Newton didn't agree with Huygens and Leibniz.
Actually, it should be pronounced Huygens. None of you can say Huygens.
No, none of us can say Huygens. Yeah, Huygens. Yeah, sure we can't. Huygens.
And if any one of you can say Huygens, there is a 99.9% chance that you're Dutch. Even Peter, you cannot say Huygens. Try it. Oh, Peter. You're a friend of mine, so I won't say much more then. Huygens, but in the lecture hall in the United States, you call the poor man Huygens. So Huygens suggested that they are waves, and Newton suggested that they are particles. And that was a very controversial issue in the 17th and in the 18th century. And all of it was in controversy for 100 years, and nobody could produce anything called really good evidence of anything. And that's the disappointing part, is all of this talk and no evidence. It was not until 1801 that this was settled.
Oh, 1801. So now we're talking about the famous young crap experiment that doesn't have anything to do with solving any problem at all. So again, the comparison between water and photons it falls apart. There's no double maxima, there's no envelope pattern, there's all kinds of missing elements. It's not the same phenomenon. It shouldn't be thought of as the same because it isn't the same. Period.
Once and for all, at least. That was the belief in 1801. So let's now turn.
I don't even know if it was the belief in 1801, although that, you know, it wasn't like everybody was all that impressed, frankly. It's just that the people who gets to tell us what the truth is, the Maxwells and the different people like that, they all said it was a wave, so therefore everybody believed it was a wave because the icon says so. So it's wherever the leaders went, the followers followed. But there was no good reason to follow.
To the proof that light comes in the form of waves.
Yeah, there's no proof.
Let's first return to water again. So instead of having one tapper on the water, on the ripple tank there, you can imagine that I have two tappers.
All right, so I've already debunked this entirely, but let's go ahead and hear it.
So I have one tapper here, and I have one tapper here, and they are a distance d apart. And so here is the line in the middle of them. So this one is tapping and this one is tapping. They are synchronized, they are connected together, so they always tap with the same frequency. And so this one will start to produce circular waves, just as you have seen. And this one will do the same. So this is then the wavelength. This represents is my shorthand notation for mountains, and that propagates out over the surface. Now imagine now that I pick a particular point, this point P, and that point P has a certain distance
from the center of the wave. So again, so just remember, that means you're supposed to do the math for this, the double slit experiment in light from the center of the wave. And if you do that, you won't get the right answer. So that's the big reveal, that this isn't the same phenomenon.
To this tapper, and it has another distance to that tapper. In physics, we call this the path length, but it's really the distance. The path length.
Yes, it's a triangle. Yeah, yes, you can see that.
Length is different for those two. In other words, one wave from one tapper reaches this point earlier than the other wave. This one gets here earlier than that one. Now, if the difference in these path lengths is the difference in path length
is a multiple of one full wavelength.
If that difference is 1/2 of a wavelength,
it's a multiple of 1/2.
Clear that when the mountain arrives from this wave, that the valley arrives from that wave. Because there's going to be a difference in travel time. It would take this wave 1/2 t seconds longer.
Right, and the next one would be 1 1/2, and the next one would be 1 2 1/2. And we just keep doing that over and over again.
To reach that point, then it takes this wave, because half a wavelength takes this amount of time. And so the two waves, as we would say in physics, are 180 degrees out of phase when one wants to drive the water up, the other wants to drive the water down. And the net result is that the water will not move. And this is very characteristic for a wave. The water will stand still. And we have a name for that. We call this destructive interference. The two waves annihilate each other in that point P, and the water will not move. So for instance, if the wavelength was 2 centimeters, as it was during our ripple tank experiment, then it would simply mean that if this path is 1 centimeter longer than that path, we would have met that condition. Then the difference in length, in path length, is half a wavelength is 1 centimeter.
So this half thing doesn't even work anyway, because the point is you have to be a full wavelength out of phase. So you have to be a full half wavelength. You have to be out of phase by a half a phase.
I show you in time what this point P will be doing. So I'm plotting here now time. So be very careful. What I was plotting here was not time. I was plotting here actually the water itself. So this was space. Now this is time. And I want to know at what time that point P is where. The point P, all the point P is doing is this: up, down, up, down, up, down on the water level. Well, so what you're going to see is something like this. And the separation in time between this and this is then capital T. So at this moment in time, point P was up here, and at this moment in time, it's up again at that point. And so this is then a nice way of saying what the position of P is as a function of time.
Let's go, boys!
One thing I've noticed about football fans is they all talk like the players can actually hear them.
These commercials.
Now you get destructive interference when the wave from the other one, if the other one were only present, then you would see this. And of course point P has to go with both of them. One wants to do this, and the other wants to do this. So point P is going to oscillate with the sum of the two, what we call displacements, the maximum displacement we call amplitude. And then
Right. Well, so the only thing you're going to see though is the, you know, all the way nothing and all the way something. So twice nothing, and the fact is you're going to see them in equal proportions, where you don't see them in equal proportions with the photon experiment. Again, another glaring inconsistency.
Therefore, point P will not move at all. If you add up these two curves, you end up with this. So point P will stay put. Destructive interference. Now, there are many points for which the difference in path is 1/2 wavelength. It is immediately obvious that there should also be a point, for instance, somewhere here on this line. There is somewhere a point here, I just stab at it, say this point, for which this distance minus that distance is 1/2 wavelength. So that point also experiences destructive interference. And so you can construct now on this surface all the points for which the difference in path length to this stepper and this stepper is 1/2 wavelength. Do any one of you know what kind of curve you get? What do we call that curve in math?
It's not a parabola, but whatever. It doesn't come out that way.
Don't feel bad if you don't know. I will draw the curve roughly, yeah? It's not a sine wave. You and I talked about it already when you came in. What do you think it is? I have to pick it up loud. Here, I have here a microphone.
Oh.
So my question is, what do you think this curve looks like?
My guess would be a paraboloid, but you said it was hyperboloid.
Yes, it is a hyperboloid, yeah. But nevertheless, it's a nice try. So you're going to get a hyperbole, and it goes like this. And if you have one here, then clearly you should also have one here for the same reason. About the same distance, so you get also a hyperbole here. Because clearly, if this wave from here comes later in time, then the wave from this point comes here later in time. So again, you have a difference between the two of 1/2 wavelength, so 180 degrees out of phase. So there's one hyperbole here and there's one hyperbole here, for which the difference in path is 1/2 lambda, and this one is also 1/2 lambda.
Okay, so I don't know if they've ever proven this hyperbola, but whatever. It might happen in water, but don't happen in light.
But you can construct other hyperbole for which the difference in path is not 1/2 lambda, but is 1.5 lambda, or 2.5 lambda. And in all cases, will you have destructive interference? And if you don't believe that, you should do your own homework and convince yourself that indeed, this case, the waves are 180 degrees out of phase. The mountain arrives when the other one has a valley. But if the separation is, the difference in path is 1.5 lambda, you have exactly that same situation. Always destructive interference. But now imagine that the difference in path length is 0. And there are lots of points for which the difference in path length is 0.
So this will be the point where he'll say something kind of stupid.
For instance, here, everywhere on this line, the distance to this stepper and to this stepper, exactly the same.
Right, and everywhere on that line in the light experiment, you're talking about something inside 1/2 of a millimeter. So there's just about nothing relevant will happen inside that tiny distance through the whole distance to the target. That tiny distance will be imperceptible and meaningless.
So the difference in path length here is 0. This is a terrible abbreviation. Distance in path length, dp, is 0. What does that mean? Will you now have destructive interference there? Or is there something else special when the difference is 0? Let me get you the microphone, because that's always nice to hear your reactions.
Don't bother doing this shit.
Yeah, you'd have something else, and if it's 0, you'd have the same mountain or the same valley.
So what does that mean then? That the two waves
would add.
They would add, exactly. They would add the maximum possible, and that's what we call, we have a name for that, constructive interference. One is destructive, they kill each other. In the other case, they support each other. So now we're going to get constructive interference. So this was destructive.
Critics and audiences are cheering for Avatar Fire and Ash, and they can't wait to see it again. And
Oh, yeah, sure.
And we have then constructive interference when the difference is either 0 or lambda or 2 lambda or 3 lambda. If you don't believe this, do your homework and you will see that the waves are then again in phase. We say the waves arrive in phase. And if the difference is neither 1/2 nor 1, well, then it is something in between. Then you don't get 0 and you don't get the maximum possible, but you get something in between.
So, but you know in water that you do get pretty much either constructive or destructive. And there's only that tiny little line between the two.
If you want to have a...
It's really light and dark. If you could see it as light and dark, it'd be very light and very dark and very light and very dark.
Rough idea about how many of those hyperbolae you have with destructive interference. We call those, by the way, in the case of water, we call them nodal lines, just a jargon, and we call these anti-nodal lines. So where you have constructive interference, we use the word antinodal. Where you have destructive, we use the word nodal. If you want to know roughly how many nodal lines there are and how many antinodals there are, anti-nodal lines, and just roughly, it's always 2d divided by lambda. And if you have some time and you spend 10 minutes on the problem, you will see why that is. So always hold on to the idea that you would see the total number is 2d over lambda. d over lambda on one side and d over lambda on the other side. If you add them up, you get 2d divided by lambda. So to get a rough idea, we're going to use that number. That's why I give you that number. I can show you on an overhead then the idea of constructive and destructive interference, if it isn't clear yet, because I'm going to show you now again that same curve as a function of time, what p is doing, and then I have the option now of moving the two waves relative to each other. So the destructive interference then is for all points on the surface of the water which experience this, that one wave says you have to go down and the other wave says, sorry, I want you to go up. And then the constructive interference is this situation, whereby the two waves add up, you get the maximum possible amplitude, you get twice the amplitude that you would, that point is no longer on a nodal line. So the nodal lines will, right here on this whole path, right in the middle, that the difference...
So obviously this isn't, those lines don't mean anything, they're nothing. This is the one phase, that's the same as this phase over here. This phase is the same as this phase over here and this phase over here. So these are the alternating phases. This is an off, this is an on, this is an off, this is an on. The little bars in between are nothing.
In distance to the tappers is 1/2 wavelength, and here it is 1.5 wavelengths. Here it is also 1/2 wavelengths, and here it is 1.5 wavelengths. The difference...
So the ons and offs are these things that all look like ons. These things in between are nothing.
Here in pass is 0, so those are your antinodal, and here the difference is lambda, and here the difference is 2 lambda, and here the difference is lambda, and there the difference is 2 lambda. So you've seen all the ingredients that are characteristic for wave phenomena, which is interference pattern. That the two...
And it doesn't make a double maxima, and again, the lights and darks are equal sizes.
Motions can annihilate each other, can kill each other, the two waves, or they can support each other to the maximum possible, which we call constructive interference. Marcos, this was superb. Thank you. I think this is an ideal moment to have a break and to make you think about this. After the intermission, I will then continue this whole way of thinking of interference with sound, and I will bring your intuition to a test, and then we will continue it even to the extreme absurdity, trying to get interference with light, in which case we bring you even beyond what your imagination can handle. Okay, Irene, 5 minutes, do what you want.
So these are all special kids, all special. They look very special.
All right, that was a luxurious break, 6.5 minutes. All right, so now comes a key question. If somehow two water waves can annihilate each other, And given the fact that sound is also a traveling wave, is it possible that somehow sound plus sound gives silence? In other words, is it possible that if I have a loudspeaker here, and I have a loudspeaker here, 2,000 hertz,
right, so we know
nice tone, all of us can hear it, are there then
So let's not
locations
waste our time with
in this?
Okay, this we've seen.
What you have done.
Booking.com has all kinds of stays because some want a house in the desert. Others do not.
You have done, and what you should not have done. More important. The separation of the two loudspeakers is about 2 meters. You could have seen that. And I also told you that the frequency was 2,000 hertz.
Okay.
One
so
ear completely.
Get out of here.
Move extremely slowly. And when the intensity of the sound goes down, move even slower. And I can assure you that you will be able to find points.
Okay, so...
And it's very difficult to do the experiment because you cannot do it with 2 light bulbs. Remember I said the tappers are synchronized. That was easy. It's also easy to synchronize the loudspeakers because they are connected to the same electronics. But how do you synchronize 2 light bulbs? And that you cannot do. And so the breakthrough that Young made, that he realized that if light is a wave, and if you make the wave go through 2 openings, so this is one opening, and this is another opening, and this separation is D. So this could be pinholes, but it could also be slits perpendicular to the blackboard, so slits like this. And if you have a light source very far away, and if light is really a wave, then spherical waves would move out. And so by the time they reach here, they come like this. And what you would see is that each one of these openings will then generate waves. You could do a similar experiment with water.
Okay, so you know that isn't possible with light because those aren't the measurements. Those aren't the distances that get the right answer. So if you want to get the right prediction, you have to use these exact positions of the distance between surfaces, not the distance between openings.
Could have shown you the interference pattern with water with 1 tapper and then with a wall with 2 openings. But the 2 tappers gave us a little bit better result. So Young realized that if you have a light source far away and you have 2 openings here, that on this side you should have all the conditions then for destructive and for constructive interference. We do this experiment with a laser, which Young did not have. And that's very nice because lasers, of course, are very powerful. The separation that I will use today is 1/4 of a millimeter. And the wavelength of the laser that we will use, the red laser,
So the distance of the openings is 250 nanometers.
Wavelength is 633 nanometers.
I mean, 250, something like that.
633 meters, 10 to the minus 9 meters. So if I now ask you how many surfaces are there whereby there is total destructive interference, that would be 2D divided by lambda. It's a high number. And so you can imagine that those surfaces, those destructive hyperboloids, and the constructive hyperboloid are close together. We have it set up here, and here we have these 2 very narrow grooves, 1/4 millimeter apart, and here we have the red laser, and we're going to see there on the screen the result.
Yeah, and you're going to see the single slit pattern. So even though he's using 2 slits, he's only going to get a single slit pattern.
Of the light intensity, and that will show you beyond any doubts that you will see locations where it is completely dark and other locations where the light is very strong, and that's where there is constructive interference.
And so what you're not going to see is, you're not going to see that. You're going to see light that's gradient. Yeah, it gets darker and lighter.
I need my laser because I have to be able to point it out to you. There it is.
So
you see here.
Clearly not a double slits experiment. It's 1 node. That's all he's got here. So he's only got enough of an opening to create this 1 pattern. And there's obviously no envelope pattern. There's just this is the envelope pattern.
Areas whereby it's absolutely no light. You see these separations on the screen are no more than maybe 2 centimeters there. So you can imagine how close the destructive interference locations and the constructive interference locations are. But here you see in front of your eyes what Young first did in 1801, which of course equipment that was nowhere nearly as good as what we have here. And this...
Right, and again, it's not a double slit pattern. You don't have the features. You just have, this is the double node, okay, of the single slit pattern. And there's no, the other fringes are missing.
Then was in those days convincing evidence that we're dealing with waves. And if you know the distance from here to the wall, which I normally call capital L, and if you know the separation of the two slits, and if you can measure the separation there between darkness and bright and darkness, then you can calculate the wavelength.
Right, and I'm just saying though, this isn't the real experiment because he didn't let the slits be open enough to create a true double slit experiment.
Pure math. That is not physics, but that is just pure math. It comes down to hyperbolas and intersect them with a screen. So that is really not all that difficult. So now comes the question, why was this absolutely conclusive evidence that we are dealing now with waves instead of with particles? And this is very fundamental. If light is waves, then you see here on a screen this interference pattern, which goes way beyond the separation D. It goes way beyond, all the way there, all the way to here. Do you see bright, dark? You saw that over a huge area there. Imagine now that light was particles, and that I would throw particles through here, and then...
So they'll draw this silly too, so this will be funny, because he, again, just completely ignore the fact that he has a slit that's so small you can't see it with the naked eye. Yeah, that's the origin.
Some other particles through there, like tomatoes. Then what you would see, so I go one after another, either through one of the opening or through the other, because if it's a particle, it can only go through one opening. You cannot imagine if you throw a tomato that the tomato would split up and that half the tomato goes through one and half through the other. So one particle goes through one opening, and then the next one may go the other. What you would see now is just a pile of particles here and a pile of particles there.
So there is no here and there. That's 1 millimeter, less than 1/4 of a millimeter. So that's the separation he had, 1/4 of a millimeter. That's right there, 1/4 millimeter. So he's saying a 1/4 millimeter away that somehow you're going to see at 1/4 of a millimeter, okay, 1/4 of a millimeter. So in the pattern that's going to be a foot across, you're going to see that 1/4 of a millimeter. What's happening in that 1/4 of a millimeter of that pattern. And you're not. It's not going to happen. It's not relevant. It's not something you would see. If there was going to be a lump, it's not going to be, oh, here's a big lump here where, you know, it went through this opening and went that way, and then it went through this opening and went that way. That's not what it's going to do. It's going to go through the opening and go straight. So what's going to happen is you're going to have a clump here, and then you're going to have another clump that's so close, you know, it's only a millimeter off, so it's going to just blur it a little tiny bit. It'll just be a little bit blurrier. But that's all it'll be. It'll be the same lump. It'll create exactly the same shape. If it was creating Donald Duck and Donald Duck, the two Donald Ducks would be almost right on top of each other, so perfect that it would just be a little blurry. But that's it. Just make it a tiny bit blurry. So it's just bullshit again. They don't even account for the actual what the actual experiment is. You know, and the fact that you're taking a tiny projector and creating a giant image.
You see 2 light spots, that's it. End of story. That would be typical for particles.
So that would be nonsense. So what you should expect with photons is that you'll have 2 blobs right on top of each other and just a tiniest bit off. One would be a little bit skewed from the other, and that's it, just a tiny bit.
I have created
Half
the
a
most
millimeter.
advanced AI.
On 1/4 of a millimeter difference in their location.
Soldier.
Tron Ares, now streaming on Disney Plus.
But instead, you see this enormous interference pattern, dark, bright, dark, bright. And so it is not so surprising that this was absolutely...
Not enormous. It only had 9 nodes in it. Okay, so it wasn't an enormous pattern. It was only one piece of the pattern because you deliberately made the slit so small that photons could barely get through, and they all got banged up. that no photon could go straight through without getting banged up.
Absolutely conclusive evidence that we're dealing here with waves. So now we can go one step further, and we can ask ourselves the question, if we now go to an experiment like this, whereby we have many small openings.
So we got rid of the experiment where there's one opening, so we're not going to see the single slit. You know, so this is how they cheat the experiment, is they don't first show you the single slit making the pattern he just showed, except it does have the rest of the nodes, and then he cheats and does a fake double slit where the openings aren't open. You know, and now he's going to do diffraction gradients, which, you know, create another reason that the pattern is spread out, and now you're actually going to send full images. So now you're going to see image data actually be transmitted.
It's not just two, which we call the double slit interference, but we have many.
So he didn't really do a double slit. Let's just understand. The slits were not open. He didn't. Obviously, it was nothing like the pattern I showed earlier, right? I mean, just you know, just to be clear, he just said we just did a double slit, and we know what the pattern for the double slit looks like, right? We just saw that. So let's just draw it on this board for him. We know it would be something like this. You know, you'd have 3 in the middle, and then you'd have 2, then you'd have 2, you know, and then you'd have 2, 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 and that's the kind of pattern you'd create. And we know that's not the pattern, okay, that he just showed. And it's because he didn't he didn't let the slits be open. He didn't let us see the true double slit where the 2 patterns are created, because it's actually a 4-source experiment. 4 surfaces, 4 sources. 2 sources create a node that can't be seen well. You need all 4 sources to see it well. That's simple. You need all 4 sources making a contribution in phase to see the photons.
This many, capital N. And the separation between 2 openings is again that famous D, the same as it was before, except it could be much smaller.
Right. Again, it's always the separation between openings, meaning it's not the center of any wave. It's always a surface. The locations that matter, the mathematical locations that matter for the vectors, and this is for the vector math. Again, this is all vector math. So this number, this D, will be used to make vector, to do vector geometry. And it's that vector geometry that tells you the location. So the simple point is obviously the vectors are being drawn from the surfaces, not the wave centers, not what would be the center of the wave.
You want to make it very small. And now light comes from this direction. And now we collect it here on a screen. And this distance is L. The question is, what will you now see?
So obviously the distance isn't L, okay, because going over here it's going to be a lot more than L, and it's going to be a lot more L over here. So obviously this should be viewed on a curved circular screen, okay, spherical screen.
And this math is more difficult. It is purely a matter of math. You now have to do a superposition of each one of these openings at any point in space, and then calculate what the...
So this one's another one that's kind of easy, all right? I mean, frankly, sorry, I should have erased all that. You know, because it's going to be interesting where you're just saying, where does it all pile up? So now you're creating multiple slits. So I'll just represent that with this or something. Okay, and what you're really going to do now is the same thing. You're just basically going to say, you're going to get a spot where all of these, okay, are in phase. And then there'll be all of these places where it won't be in phase. Okay, they all won't be in phase. And then they'll all be in phase again here. And so you're going to get these distinct spots where they're all in phase, and all the rest of the spots are not going to be all in phase. They're going to be something less than that. So you're basically saying you're going to get all the image data, all right, will go here. So whatever I shine in here will end up here. And whatever I shine in here will end up here. So it'll basically just, now you'll start seeing images. So now I could actually put light in, like the picture of a person or something. And I could actually create a person here, and a person here, and a person here. I could actually migrate their whole image, because now I'm taking all of those fringes add up to a sequential. These are sequential photons. The sequence from here, now the photons from here, the photons from here, the photons. You're sending the photons from all those locations to this one location. So now you're actually going to get a whole image. And that's what you'll see. You shoot a laser beam in, and you're going to get a dot, and a very round dot, and a very round dot, and a very round dot.
Sum is of all these n waves, and you will find locations where there is no light, and you will find locations where there is maximum light.
So there's no light. All those locations will have some light, but it's always an amount insufficient to make an image, make enough of photons to see something significant. So that's all you're doing, is you just don't have enough light to see anything.
Now the beauty about this is, which we call gratings, the beauty about this is that if you have 100, if n is 100, then the width of that bright maximum is 50 times smaller than if you had 2. And I will demonstrate that to you. In other words, the maxima become extremely well defined. And if you use n equals 1,000, which we'll do today, then the width of the maxima shrinks by a factor of 500 in comparison with only 2 slots. And that is the great power of gratings. And I will make a sketch here of the light intensity. So this is light intensity.
So that's intensity. That's
as you're going to
size,
see on the wall here. The wall will be here, but that's a detail. When we have a red laser, and we shine a red laser through a grating. If you had a red laser...
What he's actually talking about is the distance between the nodes will get bigger and bigger, but he won't change the size of them.
Laser, and you only had 2 slits, which are this far apart. I have to keep the distance the same to compare apples and apples. Then you would have seen something like this, which is what you saw there. Maximum, darkness, maximum, darkness, maximum, darkness, maximum. But if now you do that with a...
So this is a silly way of obviously drawing on, off, a ridiculous way to do that.
Grading, which has, say, 6 lines instead of 2, this maximum here becomes 3 times higher. 3 times narrower, 3 times narrower, 3 times narrower, 3 times narrower, because 6 divided by...
Yeah, it's just going to be a dot. It's just that the image is now going to be clearer because you're not spreading it out. So that's all it is. You're just making the image clearer because you're making the image more proportional to its actual size because you have more photons.
By 2 is 3. And for reasons that I'm not going to explain, they're 9 times higher. So they're higher and they are narrower.
So they're brighter is the point. So obviously now you're able to resolve it because it's not spread out. If you spread an image out, it's too weak. It'll just end up being degraded and being invisible. The darks won't be dark enough, the lights won't be light enough.
We give these locations a name. We call the one in the center 0 order. We call this first order, and we call this second order. And on this side, you also have first order and second order.
And they won't be in these same positions. So again, that's the other thing. They're going to spread. They're going to separate. They're not going to be anywhere near in the same size places. They're going to spread a whole lot.
And again, the number of maxima that you have is roughly 2d divided by lambda. I will get back to that. That's again the same idea, of course. If now you do this experiment with green light, you will see that the green light will have its 0 maximum here, because this is where the difference in path length is 0. That means the red light has its maximum, the green light, all the colors have their maximum. But you will see now that the maxima of the green light will fall here, and will fall here, but there's a difference in wavelengths between red and green, and so there's a difference in the locations of those.
Got the late night munchies. But this is all we have.
Hyperboloids. But not at the 0, but here there will be differences, and then the third one would be somewhere here. And I will demonstrate that to you. So you're going to gain with a grading 2 things. You get more light, and you get the lines very narrow. So you get the locations of brightness become extremely well defined. And I will work with your own gradings that you have been given. Your own gradings have 13,400 lines per inch. That's what the manufacturer tells us. So your gradings have a separation between the grooves in the plastic, which is 1.9 times 10 to the minus 6 meters, 1.9 microns. You can easily calculate that.
So they're not projecting these images, so now they're not making them bigger, you're making them smaller. So that's, 100% why he's making this conversation about these groups, these things being smaller spacings. So that's because he's not projecting the image anymore.
If you know that 30,400 lines per inch.
And so if he just used 4 or 5 or 6 slits, then you could just see the dots and you'd see how far apart they are.
So you can even make a rough guess about how many nodal lines and how many antinodal lines there are going to be. That's going to be 2D divided by lambda, and that is about 3.
Oops. Yeah, 6 or 7. Let's see, depending on the wavelength color, you therefore expect 3 orders on either side of the 0-order maxima. So this is just basically saying that when you look through a diffraction gradient, I actually had one here, you see 3 complete images of the same thing. So the thing you're looking at, there'll be an image there, and then you'll have a red, green, blue shifted image there, and then you'll have a red, green, blue shifted image over there. And theoretically, I guess, if you could see far enough over, you'd see another one. But you can't see more of them because you don't have enough gradient, I don't think. So I don't know if you use a whole giant film, you could make a whole bunch better. But anyway. Okay, enough of that message. Thank you. I think we've all had time to read that.
So you can expect then first order, second order, and third order. Well, we will do this experiment with group.
So it's just really unfair that he's doing this experiment exactly the opposite way, right? So instead of projecting it, making it bigger, you're doing it the opposite way, which is making it smaller.
Green light and with red light. And since the wavelength of red light is larger, we will just miss the 3. We will get 2 orders in red, but in the green light, which has a smaller wavelength, you will see 3. But this is the first thing that I want to do, to have your grading, which is right here. We have your grading right here. It's the same one that you have. You will get a chance to use yours later. And we're going to show you what this interference pattern is going to be like on this screen. And you can compare it with that, which was 2 slits. Those slits were 1/4 millimeter apart. Now you have a grading whereby the separation between the grooves is only about 2 microns.
Right, and you're looking at it, well, now he's projecting it. Okay, so we'll see what happens.
Not only does that give me a larger spacing between them, but look at the wonderful, how well the maxima are defined. So I'll make it dark.
So you should see them pretty far
dim
apart.
Class is probably enough. So you see how enormously well the maxima are defined.
Let's see them. There, see. So you can see it on the screen, right? So you can so see, this is what he should have, I don't know why he explained it the way he did, because obviously it creates this, confusion. Sorry. Yeah, that didn't help you any. So I have to get rid of all of this to point out there. You can see the one dot was, I could see it before. Oh, it's way over there. Yeah, okay. Why is it doing this? I don't need to know that message. So there's a dot way over right there. See that little dot up there? Yeah, you could barely. Oh, I should use my little. What's the pointer for if you're not going to use it, Gary? So the dot is right there. See that little dot? Yeah, that little dot. And then there's another dot, and then another dot. So that was what I was trying to explain, is the dots are going to get further and further away. So he was drawing them as getting closer and closer. No, they're getting closer and closer if you view them with the light coming in. But if you're projecting them, obviously they're going to get further and further apart. So I'm glad I was able to clear that up, because, he's just being deceptive, frankly. All right. So you really can see it if you look really hard right there. All right, continuing.
Diameter of the laser is about 3 millimeters.
All right, so there's a better view. Right, so now you can see that the distance is a little fucked up, right? There should be one there. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, this doesn't seem properly spaced. But
and so the 3 millimeters cover roughly.
Yeah, okay. So yes, the distance does change, because that's the same thing is happening with the other fringes patterns, but we don't get to see them in enough of an arc to see them start to change in terms of their distance. So that's why there's a distance change.
1,500 lines of your grading. And that's all that counts, of course, what the number of capital N is. So you use about 1,500 lines.
And so, like I said, if you really look at these things, they're going to get rounder and rounder as images, frankly, because they're going to look more and more like the laser.
So that gives you a shrinkage compared to 2 lines of a factor of 750.
Because you really will see the image. You'll see an actual image where those dots are. So when you look through it, you'll see something in front of you, and you'll see the same image here, and then you'll see that image again. So it's superimposed, of course, on the background. So you're seeing a false image in these locations.
I always carry a grading with me, no matter where I go. And I will show you now, this is the same grading that you have. I will show you now with a green laser, which has a shorter wavelength. I will do this experiment. It's exactly the same grading, you have to take my word for it. And I will show you now that if I have a green laser, that notice that the separation between the bright green and the bright red is different, because the green has a different wavelength. The smaller wavelengths, the separation is smaller. And if Marcos is willing to walk all the way to the right, he can show you the third order in green, but the third order in red does not exist. And so this now is an amazing tool to analyze the spectra of the various gases. When you heat them, they produce a characteristic set of colors, a characteristic set of frequencies. And these can now be studied, and they can be viewed with your grading.
Yes, which isn't the same subject, frankly. That's about what atoms do to light. But whatever, that doesn't have anything to do with whether it's a wave or a particle.
If you look at helium, you will see that it is not like the sun, that you see a continuum of all the colors, like the rainbow, but that you see very distinct lines in the helium. And the reason why we call them lines is really a misnomer, because we do these experiments with sources, light sources, which themselves are lines. And that's what I'm going to show you. And I want you to use your own gradings now. So if you get your own gradings, then I'm going to make you look through those gradings. Look at a light source here, which itself is going to be a line. And if you hold your grading the right way, you have to try that a little bit, you will see this spectrum. First, you'll see zero order, where all the colors overlap. That's in the middle. You will see first order, second order, third order, maybe, depends on the color. And I'm going to make it completely dark. And then you see this amazing thing, how nature, in this case, produces unique frequencies.
You know, I've always found it strange. People really want to save money, but are so willing to toss their hard-earned coin into
discrete frequencies, and no longer a continuum. And the grading is an ideal tool to see them. And try to look on both sides of the zero order, so that you can see the first order. I see the first order. Wow, notice that at the zero order in the center, all the colors overlap. There's a maximum. That's zero order. But there, since
the many spectra produced by the grading cannot be made visible. This is an example of a single helium spectrum. Okay. So whatever. So they're just showing us something else, but whatever. Fine. Thank you.
Difference in path length is zero. Because all the colors overlap.
So these are just basically, the argument is that the geometry of these atoms can change depending on where their electrons are. So they can be in states, okay? And that if electrons are going to be moved in the geometry, the external electrons can, I guess, in the process of being ionized. So in the process of ionizing, electrons can move from either a long distance from inside. Oh, I could draw it. Yeah, you could. So why don't you do that? All right. So we were just talking about the valence electrons. So the valence is the electrons in the outside, not electrons in the nucleus. And the point is there's electrons that are in, closer, and then there's electrons that are further away. And all of these spectrum lines are just a representation showing that when I ionize one of these atoms, that is, I screw up its electrons, I take one out, I can move it from, here to here, or I can move it from this distance, or I can move it some other distance, but it's always some distance that it's going to be possible for it to move, some combination of distances, and that will be a different velocity. And the different velocities create different frequencies. And so that's why you get different colors, is because the faster the electron moves, the more it compresses the stuff that's going to reflect off of it. The stuff that's going to slow the electron down is the reflections. And those reflections now will be turned into a new frequency. So this is going to create the purple light. And, a less amount of distance will go with that greeny kind of stuff. And then the yellow will be even a less distance. That's going to be how it works. Basically. I don't know why these spectrum lines are so dark when the color of the light seems kind of red, but whatever.
Overlap there. But then when you go to first order, you see clearly that the blue is closer to the zero order than the yellow, and the red is the farthest away, and then you see a second order, and I can even see many colors in third order, and I see the same on the left side. I can show you now neon, which is also very interesting. Oh yeah, I see clearly first order, second order, and most colors, even the most colors I see in third order.
So I don't know exactly. The two patterns here are duplicated, so I guess that's what he's talking about. So this is the first order, this is the second order. It's the different images. So you see the one image, then the second image, then the third image. But yeah, I don't know exactly. These don't seem that representative of that distance, but okay, we'll just say that's true.
So you should now be convinced that light comes in the form of waves, as suggested by Huygens, and not in the form of particles, as suggested by Newton. And that was the goal of my talk today. However, as I mentioned earlier, I could give another talk in which I could convince you that light does not consist of waves.
No, that wasn't much of an audience, you gotta say.
But that light actually consists of particles. 20th century physics has shown that light comes in the form of individual photons. And these photons can be localized in space. And we can detect them and we can count them in a similar way that you can detect and count individual tomatoes.
So you really can't. So that's part of the big fraud, dude. This whole idea that you can single photon, because there really is, the fact is that there's a ton of the same kind of energy, and it's just about matching that frequency. So there's pieces everywhere. Everywhere there's pieces of photons. And they're going to randomly make photons all the time, those pieces.
Which is a very
randomized,
different picture from a spherical wave moving out in all directions. We're now talking about small bullets, well localized, and you can detect them, like tomatoes.
Yeah. Well, again, you're not really detecting. You're detecting an event. You're collecting an event. And the event you collect here is going to be different than the event you collect here and here, here, here. Every place I collect the event, it's going to be in a different event. So it might indicate that it's the same amount of pressure, but it's the same pressure made out of different elements.
So instead of throwing light photons at you, I could make an attempt to throw tomatoes at you. These are very nice. I grow them in my own backyard, and they are very soft. So if you catch them, don't squeeze too hard. You want one?
I play Linda Little in Sandhouse. She's at a point at the beginning of the movie where she's
Will remind you for the rest of your life what a photon is not. Oh, good for you. I can throw some other photons to you. Here goes a photon. There goes a photon. And another photon. And for Peter, another photon. And for you there, another photon. 2 photons. Now, how can light be waves and particles at the same time? In the case of our two-slit experiment, which was Jan did, light waves go through both slits. That's easy. You can just see that. There is no problem at all. In this picture, if light is a wave, it goes simultaneously through both.
All right, so whatever that is, light goes through both. Yes, some photons go through one slit, some photons go through the other slit. It's just idiotic to say that photons are these gigantic things that somehow one photon, some part of the blimp goes through the slit and some part doesn't, and it's okay. It doesn't matter if the whole photon goes through or half a photon goes through. It's just some sort of gluey thing. So I don't even know what they're thinking. It's just so silly.
But if light is really a bullet, a photon, a particle, then it either goes through one opening or it goes through the other opening.
Yes, exactly.
So how can it be now that we see this?
Well, it can be because we know it's a surface phenomenon. The surfaces are doing something really simple. The surfaces are just saying, I'm a surface, okay, and we'll make another. And it's just basically saying, I'm going to, okay, scatter. So anything that goes near the surface is going to get scattered. So I'm shooting BBs, and all the BBs that go near the surface get scattered, but they all had a pattern going in. They all had a distance. So now when they scatter, a BB from here can go all the way over here, and it can combine with a BB here, and they can recreate the frequency. And that's all they need to do. They just need to hit this surface at the right frequency. So I can send pieces from here, I could send pieces from here, I could send pieces over here, I could send pieces over here. And again, I have a 50-50 chance of putting it back in phase or out of phase. And that is the simple explanation. That's how it can be made out of particles and create a pattern of in phase and out of phase.
Interference pattern, if we argue, or if we can argue that they are also particles and bullets. And here lies now the great mystery in physics, which caused me and others sleepless nights. And the secret to this is the following. As long as you do not measure through which opening.
So we know you can't measure a photon. You can't even measure an electron, frankly. You can't without completely destroying where it's going. The smallest thing you can hit it with is a photon. Photons are famous for moving electrons, so clearly you can't even use photons to see an electron. So the whole thing is silly. You can't measure.
The photon went, you will see a beautiful interference pattern. The moment that you make an effort, which you can't...
So no, you can't do it. So you can say you can do it. You can't do it. You can't make an effort without annihilating the experiment. You just blew it up. So yeah, you can wipe out the experiment. That is, you can tidal wave the whole village into non-existence. But you can't make this argument that somehow that was a legitimate experiment. I'm going to use 4 million tons of force or 5 pounds of force on a spring. And I'm going to say, well, the spring should be able to do 5 million or 5 ounces. No, it shouldn't be able to do both. That's ridiculous.
And you measure through which one of these openings the photon went.
So there's no way to do that. It's just a ridiculous statement. It can't be done. Can't even be done with an electron. Can't even be done, frankly, with a single atom. It's just ridiculous.
You have destroyed the interference pattern. You don't see the interference pattern.
So there's no evidence that any of that has ever been attempted or they ever did it, and then you don't see anything? No, there's no evidence you don't see anything at all. So more lying.
Anymore. The light says, you want me to be a particle? You pay a price for that. And this is the price that you pay. It will only show you one pile of...
No, so that never happened. So they never did this experiment where they show us the one pile and then the other pile. So go ahead, show me that. Because it doesn't happen. Yes, that's right. It doesn't happen. So no matter how whatever detector you put on a slit, you will not create this pattern. That will never happen. Because it was ludicrous to think it even happens in the first place. There's no reason to think that the tiny opening means the light goes that way and the light goes that way. That's not what it does. It goes straight. And it's still 1 millimeter apart when it hits the surface. It's not being fringed. It's not being deflected. It's not being scattered. The light that goes through just goes dead straight.
photons here and one pile of photons there.
Only the light that goes by the surface is the only light that's spreading.
But light says, if you don't ask to which opening I went, then that's fine, then you behave, and then I'll...
Okay, so it's just such a lie. They never did any experiment like this, never took place. It's just such a lie.
I will show you the interference pattern. And so this is a bizarreness, of course, that no one really can completely understand, and this is, of course, where quantum mechanics...
Well, nobody can understand when you lie and create a false circumstance that doesn't even happen. And so, yes, I can't explain your fake circumstance that doesn't actually happen. Ugh.
Comes in. That is when you take 804 and 805 at MIT, and this is why I said earlier in my lecture, once you have taken 804 and 805, you have no clue anymore what light is all about.
I don't even think they're online. I don't think I've ever seen 804 and 805, frankly.
So yes, it can behave like a particle, but it can also behave like a wave, and that depends on what experiment you do and how you do the experiment. It is one or the other.
Right, so this is too silly. Depending on how you observe it decides what it is. Well, that's just too silly.
And I have highlighted today only the wave character. Now I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in my classes. There's a
yeah, well, you're going to look forward to it. It ain't going to happen. These guys don't look like they're the tomorrow's scientist. I don't think so.
Chance that you will come to MIT, and there is also a chance that you will have me, maybe a few years from now. And then we can talk about this some more. And I want you to appreciate the fact that this is not easy stuff. Not for you, but not for me either, believe me.
So these must be people who have money or something. You know, they get to go to a college and get a, you know, please, you know, rich people, come to our college.
Thank you. It was nice having you here.
These aren't the people who got here on a scholarship. You know, that's for sure.
Booking.com has all kinds of stays because a city hotel is right for some, but not quite right for others.
Okay, so they're all fat. Yeah, 90% fat. Anyway, okay. So anyway, I didn't think I'd play the whole thing, but I did. I managed it. So little, right? So out of all of that, there was just a tiny bit of doing the slit experiment, and he didn't even do the variable one. So he does have a video where he does the variable slit, you know, where you can make it wider and narrower. And we didn't even get that one, which was disappointing. And yeah, the ads are just a joke, right? I mean, he sold out like 20 years ago. He made some deal with some company, you know, where they gave him the money up front and he gave away rights to his videos. So, yeah, but it's just such a tacky thing to do, is to put ads on your, you know, on these videos. And he shouldn't even have rights to these videos because, frankly, you know, MIT produced them, and he basically, you know, really fucked up in the sense that he got caught with some shenanigans with the students. And, you know, MIT gave him these videos, which seems an awful nice thing for them to do, considering they had to basically disown him, you know, as a professor. So, but whatever. Just not good. It's not their fault. Well, whatever. It's not about fault. I mean, I wasn't saying it's, you know, obviously we're all victims of our parentage and shit like that. But, I mean, I don't know if it's right to say, I mean, even as a teenager, you should be able to figure out that your body's not really designed to be fat. It doesn't work, you know, in its optimum performance. It's not going to be achieved in the fat state. So you should have some notion that you really shouldn't get too fat. So I'd argue it's kind of a logical argument. But whatever. And such. So another great name, right? Hernandez Quad Fart. Oh, boy, that's, you know, you're just saying, why do people show up for that? You know, that's just, yeah, I don't know. I just don't get you people. But I don't get anything about being alive anymore. The whole thing just seems like such a putridly horrid joke. You know, just such a farce. Crap. I don't know how anybody can make any sense out of it. All the bullshit and just to get old and die. I mean, all of this crap just to get old and die. Oh, great. I did all this shit just to get old and die. Fuck you. What a pain in the ass. Just to get old and die. Alright, anyway. What do I want to find here? Let's see how many people here. 7. Yeah, that's not too good. Alright, so maybe I'll just get the hell out of here. And such. Seems late enough. So, till the next time, I guess. Unless you have anything interesting to say. Let's see if there's anything interesting. Just for $5. I don't know what that means, but yeah. Let's see. Everyone is so dumb. Everything is just spinning around in circles. Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I really didn't think it would turn out this way. I mean, I really didn't think, you know, it's going to get this ugly. You know, that we would actually do this whole idiocracy thing and the right and the left would both turn into complete lunatics and there's just nobody talking anything reasonable or sensible. And I mean, it's just, you're just like, shit. Is there any point in even talking to human beings because they all seem to be in camp shit or camp fucktard. I mean, they're not in any, you know, camp herpes or camp hepatitis C. I mean, they're not in any kind of camp I could ever go to. You know, I can't, you know, I can't play with these people. None of them are on anything called the right side. You know, there's no way, nobody wearing anything like a white hat, you know. It's covered in glitter and bullshit, or it's, you know, covered in dog shit. But anyway. Enjoyed the video. See you next time. Yes, that's a good enough statement. This is all. It's such interesting. Physics is just so interesting. There's so much to it. There's so much that's just so fucking interesting. And I just can't believe there's nobody really interested. Me. You know, and all these other people just, whatever they tell me, I just believe. Any silly, cracky, silly nonsense story they tell me, you believe. You know, and every single one of their stories just gets dumber and sillier. You know, I mean, you think dark matter was bad, and then they go multiverse, and you're saying, what multiverse? Like, dark matter wasn't silly enough. Oh, now you're going to tell me a new universe is created every single time a photon, a piece of a photon, interacts with a piece of matter. All of a sudden, there's a new universe. I mean, it's just so fucking silly. God damn. So anyway, let's see. It's always been sort of crazy. Nobody talks about this. Yeah, it does seem strange that nobody does talk about even just how, you know, like I said, as a 66-year-old man, it sucks being 66. This isn't no, your retirement's going to blow, okay? It's not going to be a great thing because all these shitty things are just waiting to happen to you. Okay, your life isn't going to get sparklingly fun. It's going to get profoundly frightening, you know, and that's all it's going to get. It's just frightening. You're going to have to worry all the time. Oh, am I going to break my hip? Is my prostate going to go fuck on me? Wow, what the hell is going to go wrong? That's all you're going to do is be figuring out what the fuck is going to go wrong. You know, anyway. All we really talk about that is interesting is these futurist fantasies that will never happen. Well, I don't even see any futurist fantasies, right? I mean, they don't even, there's not even anything made about any kind of anything other than dystopic futures, right? I mean, is there any way to really talk about a realistic future where let's spend, you know, 1 million years asleep in stasis, and then we go to another world and we get there and it's a bunch of lizards. What's the story going to be? Oh, I rode on the lizard. I mean, what's this? You know, there's no stories. There's no story to write. You're not going to get to another planet and it's going to be really cool fuckables or something. There's not going to be any fuckables. There's not even going to be any snacks. Oh, it's just, you know, what do you think you're going to go to? Cheez-It planet, you know? You get there and it's all made out of Cheez-Its. So everything would be great because you could just eat Cheez-Its all day. Oh, I just don't get you people. Potato chip planet, you know, whatever. It really is just so fucking funny. Let's all live in O'Neill cylinders and eat fast food all day. Yeah, well, we're already doing it, right? Which I think is perfectly sensible in a way, is people being immersed into technology because real life sucks. I mean, you know, the only part of life that has any hope at all is the fake part. Real life sucks. I mean, you go out here on a nice summer day and the mosquitoes kill you. You know, or you get Lyme, like I did. I mean, my summer got ruined because I got Lyme disease, and then I got some other bacterial thing that some fucking tick carried. You know, and you're just like, what the fuck? I can't even go outside now. You know, screw this. This planet is just not worth living on. I still can't believe I got Lyme disease again. When I moved to a place where there shouldn't be any. God damn. Anyway, so yeah, whatever. I'm just saying, I didn't really figure on becoming this. I have to say I'm profoundly depressed, but I'm not like depressed like I can't get anything done and I'm really, really depressed. But I just mean it's just so, fuck. You can't even find anything to watch. I mean, I really do. I watch physics videos because everything else is so unentertaining. I mean, the movies are terrible. There's just nothing interesting. Chicks aren't even hot anymore. I don't even know what the fuck's going on. I can't find anything to, you know, it's the least bit encouraging. Everything is just getting plastic and weak, and it's like everything's made out of wax and it's all melting. You know, that's how I feel. It's like everything good, it was made out of wax and it's all just melting. Ugh. Just hate it. Anyway, the future is just so depressing. Yes, it's like we're all sort of just waiting for the next worst. Yeah, exactly. It's just ew. Ew. I mean, if you have any brains at all, it's just ew. You know, there's no good news here. Ugh, fuck. So anyway, enough ranting about that kind of crap. But I'm just surprised that people just don't see that they're just so fucking, they're so religious. They don't really see the science thing here. You know, like, this is scientific. There's a truth here. I mean, it either is twice the force, twice the motion, or it's not. You know, one of those two has to be the truth. There can't be this silly notion that it's a wave and it's a part of, no, you can't do this shit. There's a real truth, and you have to invest in it. You have to invest in how you get to the truth, which is doing the fucking experiments. I mean, demanding that they get done. I mean, the fact that I am the only person on the internet advocating that they need to do the Eddington experiment from space. I'm the only person on the whole fucking internet that says those words. They need to do the Eddington experiment from space. Has anyone else on the internet, with all these science channels, said those fucking words? No. Just me. That's disgraceful science. That nobody cares. Nobody can even understand how important that particular experiment is because it's an image experiment. You can't do it with scatter. You can only do it with photons and accurate data. You can't do it with bullshit. You know, you can't do it. You can't make it out of scatter. It has to be a gravity that bends the light, because scatter would be detectable because it won't be an image anymore. Damn, these people. All right, anyway, enough. So I shall be on my way. Oh, why do I want to read something? Julius Evolia. Well, who the fuck is that? I mean, I just love these people that drop names. Yeah, okay. Yes, I'm sure it's very interesting. How much you want to bet it's not going to be very interesting? I mean, it's this user, whatever, you know, Google, whatever this sloppy name thing is with no fucking goddamn name. I mean, who puts this user dash thing does? Who does that? Oh, what is it? Buddhism then? Oh, it changed my life. I turned into a fairy princess. I tapped my heels 3 times. There was no place like home. Ugh, gross. Absolutely gross. So nobody's going to take me a bet that this is going to be pansy philosophy, right? This is going to be some kind of pansy sweater-wearing Mr. Rogers wooey wooey baby talk mush mush. Yeah, that's all it's going to be. Well, let's go see, right? I'm here. I can Google it, right? Let's see. Is that what I want? No, that's not the video I want. Let's see. Which one do I want to go? Oh, let's do Blue Moonshine. Yeah, we'll use his spot. Okay, so let's put this Julius Volta guy in here and see what we get in YouTube. Revolt against the modern world. Oh, I'm sure that's just too interesting. So he looks like almost a communist or something. Let's see. So this against the modern world. See, this is where they all go wrong. Like somehow everything was great back when you died when you were 25 years old of a cold. The world was so cool when all your kids died. I mean, that was so much more fun than having your kids live. I just don't get these people who think the past was somehow fun. The past was absolutely horrible. Oh, so it's just amazing. Revolt against the modern world. I mean, how could this? You can't even, I can't even imagine who would want to live in the ancient world, with the shit in the streets. Can you imagine even, living in England in the 1700s? I mean, you had shit, just shit, absolute fucking human shit. And you're walking in it, and you call it a sidewalk, and it's covered in fucking human shit. And you're going to tell me that would be okay with, that's cool. You could imagine living like that and saying, yeah, that's really cool. Oh, God. I'm just like, oh, how can you people be that crazy? Oh, Jesus, what sickos. All right, a gentle introduction to Julius Evelete. So whatever this is. Let's play some of this shit. It's got a commercial on it, of course. Why do I want to pay $190 or something?
Smooth. I can feel it on the ice, on my skin. Venus gets it with...
Julius Evola was an Italian philosopher who lived from 1898 to 1974. His life was deeply affected by his experience serving as an artillery officer in World War I, and his intellectual path led him to become possibly the most traditionalist man who ever lived in the West. Evola has been described as the world's most right-wing thinker, and although framing him in the political...
Fuck. So why would I have an interest in this? I mean, the world's most right-wing, crazy, Christian, kooky, nutty, capitalist, thieving, cruddy way possible. I mean, what possible value could I find in this asshole? Someone is an elitist when they have a monocle. I approve. Good start is the bow and the club. I don't know what that means. Metaphysics, mindset of more people I don't know. English looks good. Define. I don't know what any of this shit says. Well, anyway, garbage. Yeah, I'm already done. Jump ahead a little.
War has a different face in accordance with its being placed under the sign of one or another of the castes.
Oh, fuck this.
End quote. And, quote, impurities not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy, end quote. Of being and becoming, and the negation of the negation. Being and becoming are dualistic philosophical concepts where being is the pure form of something and becoming is a temporary fragment of that being. One might also use the term mere appearance to describe...
Whatever, I'm bored. This is all Nietzsche nihilist bullshit. So, yeah, fuck you. I don't like your screen name. I don't like you. Yeah, fuck you. That's what I'll say. I mean, if a right-wing loony has changed your life in some way you think is for the best, then you're obviously a shitty human being. Yeah, that's all I can say. The left sucks, but I'm just saying the right is untenable. Nobody rational could be conservative. It's not possible. So, fuck you. I'll just put him in a 24-hour timeout. Yeah, that'll make me happy. All right, that'll be good enough punishment. But whatever, it doesn't matter. I just have no. I just can't even imagine right-wing politics being anything but greed and ignorance. I mean, there's nothing else to it. There's nothing else. It's just selfish, greedy, ignorant. And they're not even trying to be anything else but selfish, greedy, and ignorant. All right, anyway. So, till the next time and such, get the hell out of here. And so forth and whatnot. Blah, 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 blah.